Welcome to this meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville. It's 6:30, August 15th, 2023. Madam Clerk, do we have any regrets?
I believe we have regrets from Councillor Knoll.
Thank you very much. I would invite everybody to rise and join Council in O Canada. Thank you, everybody. In 1820, Indigenous people here began welcoming settlers from all over the British Empire. Soon, they were helping slaves escaping from the United States to settle here too. Today, our Indigenous founding partners are still here, enjoying the land with us. They fish and camp under their treaty rights. Indigenous people in their thousands also live with us as neighbors and friends. Our Indigenous white and Black settlers created a community with an attractive degree of harmony and prosperity. In 1857, Ontario gave official recognition of Oakville as a town. At Town Hall, all of these years later, we fly the flag of the Mississaugas of the Credit beside the flags of Oakville, Ontario, and Canada. We fly these flags together to acknowledge our origins. People from all over the world are attracted to the livability we've created. We offer newcomers a warm spirit of welcome. We offer everyone our founding story so everyone knows what we are part of. We feel distress and sorrow for acts of racism and intolerance suffered across Canada and here at home. We want our future to be equitable and inclusive for everyone. The path of truth and reconciliation will unite us all if we give it a chance. Please keep well, stay safe, and let us on Council know of any chance to be helpful to you and yours. Please let us know anytime you can help increase Oakville's harmony, prosperity, and livability. Council, I need to know if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest, and we apologize for declaring Councillor Knoll regrets. He has joined us online. Welcome. Pecuniary interests. I'm not seeing any, but I'm not sure I gave you enough of a chance. There are none, Madam Clerk. I would ask if two of us would move and second the minutes, and I'll take a motion from Councillor Nanda and a second from any hand? Councillor Elgert, thank you. Any objection? There being none, the minutes are adopted. We have one standing committee report. I'd look for a mover and seconder for that report. Councillor Duddick moved. Need a seconder. Councillor Longo, thank you. Any objection? That's carried as well. Now, we have consent items, the corporate policy update, the bylaw to invoice payments in lieu of tax on provincial institutions, the bylaw to delegate authority to the Assessment Review Board, and the staff report on the sale of surplus land. I wonder if I could have a, before we do those, could I have a mover and seconder to resolve in the committee of the whole? Councillor Duddick, Councillor Giddings, any objection? Then I will now look if there's a mover for the consent items. Councillor Adams, thank you. Any objection? Then the consent items are consented to. Our next item is, maybe this is the drama of the night, because it's about fighting. We have our long-awaited report on kite fighting, and we have a registered delegation who is joining us virtually. And we have a presentation by Jim Barry, the Director of Municipal Enforcement Services. So, Mr. Barry, we're all ears and eyes, and away you go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for inviting me tonight to speak about fighting kites, item number 10.1 on your agenda. Next slide, thanks. As you'll recall, on June 19th, staff were at council to talk about fighting kites, and at that time, we were asked to come back with some options on the potential of banning fighting kites within the town on public and private property. Tonight's report provides 3 options for council's consideration. The recommended option, which is banning fighting kites in parks, with an additional review period and a return on Q2 of 2024 to provide further information on the opportunity to ban on private property, an option to prohibit fighting kites on public and private property, and finally, the communications option that we presented in June. Next slide, please. As background, fighting kites is an activity where 2 or more participants fly kites with the aim of cutting an opponent's string. And I would note that the string is one of the more problematic pieces of fighting kites, as it's very abrasive. It's generally coated with some type of a coating that it can include small pieces of glass. The kite string, it also could be piano wire, fishing line, or other types of nylon string. When these strings are not properly disposed of, they can pose a risk and health and safety issue and cause injuries to people and pets. Next slide, please. So option number 1 is the recommended option contained in the report tonight, which is to implement a ban in parks and report back on further options in Q2 of 2024. The Parks Bylaw does not currently ban kite flying. This amendment would capture areas including parks, gardens, trails, valleys, squares, athletic fields, harbors, and recreational grounds. This is very similar to the regulations that are contained or that have been put in place by the City of Toronto and the City of Mississauga. Next slide, please. Here are some additional amendments to ensure activity is safe, including prohibiting the activity on parking lots, roadways, pathways, where the prohibition is posted. I would also note that obtaining a permit for competitive flying kites, which is one of the regulations being proposed, is similar to other activity we include in parks at the present time. The municipal enforcement budget can accommodate the costs for option 1 in 2023, but we would have to return in 2024 as part of the budget process. Under the option number 1, enforcement would be conducted by municipal enforcement staff using a progressive enforcement model, starting with education and working up to charges if the situation presented itself. I'd also note that the Parks Bylaw provides for a $300 administrative penalty process, and there are escalating penalties included in that, and they escalate from $400 to $500 on subsequent offenses. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Option 2 is the option that deals with dealing with fighting kites on public and private property. Staff are not aware of any other municipality that has done this, so there is not a lot of background we can pull for this option. And I would note that it would be somewhat difficult to enforce. Again, as we discussed last time, there are identification issues, property access issues, and some optics issues as well. Next slide, please. The municipal enforcement budget, again, can accommodate this issue if this option is passed in 2023, and it may, again, have budgetary impacts in 2024. As with option number 1, municipal enforcement staff would enforce the regulations, and I would note that we have worked with legal through the creation of this bylaw, And officers do have the authority under the Municipal Act 2001 to inspect private property, including Crown lands, at any reasonable time to determine whether the bylaw is being complied with. Now, it does pose a problem depending on where the kite fighting is occurring to actually get to where it's happening, but there is an authority under the Act to allow it. Again, we would use progressive enforcement through this process, leading up to more significant fines if the situation presents itself. And I would note that the bylaw also provides for charges under the POA if necessary. Next slide, please. Option number 3, this is the option that was presented back in June. And again, this is more focused on communication and coming back in the future based on that communication to identify if the need still exists to create a bylaw. Next slide, please. Should council choose option number 1 or option number 2, staff will develop and undertake a campaign to ensure that the public understands the new regulations and the parks bylaw regarding kite flying, option number 1, or alert the public of the option 2, kite fighting on public and private property. Next slide, please. And I'm available for any questions.
Well, you appear to have one at least. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. Through you, Member Burton, thank you for the presentation. So just to be clear, if we go with option 2, then we could still do the education, so at least send something out so that people would know that it is illegal on both private and public property?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. On any option, we will be doing communications.
And our legal staff have looked, and we can pass such a bylaw.
We can pass, through you, Mr. Mayor, we can pass such a bylaw.
I thank you for that. I think I'll wait to say more when I have the delegation. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just, no doubt, this is something that I don't think is very pleasant, and it's dangerous, as Councillor Elgar has made sure we're all aware of. How many complaints are we getting here? Hundreds, dozens, a handful? I mean, what are we looking at here in terms of how pervasive of an issue this is across the town of Oakville?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, since we don't currently enforce it, I can't really tell you how many complaints we've got. I can tell you that we've been in contact with several people over this process. So we do know that there is a problem out there. The size of the problem, it's pretty hard for me to tell you tonight. What I can tell you is looking at our neighboring municipalities, Mississauga and Toronto, that have enforced it or have put in similar regulations. Since 2013, I believe the City of Toronto has dealt with 33 complaints in total on kite flying, and they have a bylaw that just deals with parks, and 5 of those were fighting kites. When we spoke with the City of Mississauga, they didn't have any record of, although they have a bylaw, they didn't have any record of a response to kite fighting.
So I'm sorry, the City of Toronto, you said since
2013.
2013, 5 complaints on kite fighting.
On kite fighting itself.
Kite fighting, in 10 years with over 2 million people, 5 complaints. Okay. I guess my other question leading to this is we have a difficult enough time making sure we can enforce property standards, bylaws, we can enforce fishing after hours, we can enforce, a whole range of things. What is your comment on our ability to enforce this on private property in particular, to go catch people, get the evidence, prosecute them? I mean, what is your confidence that our bylaw officers would be able to have an impact with this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, without understanding the size of the issue, it's very difficult for me to come up with a resource impact that it would cause. What I can say, again, I believe I said last time we were talking about this subject, it is difficult for staff to respond to these issues. It's difficult to identify who's actually violating the bylaw for 2 reasons. There's no requirement under law for an individual to identify themselves to a bylaw enforcement officer, which causes problems. And there's also the fact that when there's kite fighting taking place, when the kite string is cut, it's cut at a very high altitude, and that string can travel a long way. So identifying who belongs to string that may land on a different property can be problematic. That said, if there are complaints made and we get there and we do plan on some staffing to deal with this, so we could have an impact. It's just very difficult to tell to what degree.
Thank you, your worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dudek.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Barry, have you had any discussions with Halton Conservation in regards to, I'm thinking the Glenorchy lands. I know that at the board level, we've talked about it where they're experiencing quite a few problems on that property. And the enforcement is an issue for them going in, that they're worried about the safety of their officers, for lack of a better word. So have you spoken to them at all in terms of occurrences or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have had ongoing conversations with Conservation Halton about enforcement, and we've had those exact conversations about issues of safety of officers going in for not just kite fighting, but other issues. So that is in all likelihood not, and I would also identify that if in a lot of cases, the activity that's going on inside Conservation Halton property is in locations that our staff couldn't get to. So it'd be very difficult to deal with some of those issues, and I would say there would be safety issues as well.
Okay, but under the bylaw, would that be considered private property?
Under the bylaw, through you, Mr. Mayor, under the bylaw, that would remain Conservation Halton property. Since they have their own enforcement unit, we would leave it up to them to manage their property.
Okay, thank you.
And Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I realize we don't have a bylaw in place, so it might take a little bit of guesswork on your part. I would imagine that this would be complaint-based. You wouldn't be able to see a time where you have your municipal enforcement people out there checking people in parks with kites. It would be an area more rural, possibly, that people have experienced difficulties in the past.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that would be the intention. This would be a solely reactive response.
Great, thank you.
All right then. Councillor Lischina.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Barry, my understanding is so far the complaints are about private property. Is that correct? Or are we actually having the people that have got in touch with us? Has any of that been through our public parks?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding is it's mostly from private property. Again, I can only caution that I can't give an absolute answer because when a kite string is cut, it's very hard to tell where it comes from. So we know that it's landing on private property. We assume it's coming from private property, but it is possible that it could be coming from public property as well.
So option 1 and 2 would not really have anything to, or would option 2 cover private property and then you have to get there in time?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, option 2 deals with public and private property.
So you would still have to see it in action.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we would still have to gather the appropriate evidence to prove that somebody had committed an offense.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Scott Shee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor, we can't hear you anymore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry. So, thank you for the presentation. So you mentioned about the budget. So whatever the option 1, 2, 3. So do we have any numbers of this budget will be impacted for in 2024 about this different options?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at this point this year, we anticipate, again, this was some guesswork, but we anticipate the issue with fighting kites would not go past the end of October. This year, we do have a park enforcement program that runs for the most part of that time, so the cost to manage it until the end of October would be covered. Based on that, we would then, for the 2024 timeframe, we would have to figure if we wanted to continue or come forward with a cost for that. At this point, we don't know. We may get no calls, and we don't want to have a budget that we don't need.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Council, may I call the registered delegation? Madam Clerk, would you bring in?
Yes, Vanessa Warren is coming in virtual.
Super.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, Ms. Warren, welcome. We're looking forward to your information.
Thank you. Sorry, struggling with some rural internet here. Yay, looks like I'm online. Great. I do hope there's some questions afterwards because listening to this discussion makes me want to rewrite what I wrote earlier. I wasn't privy to your discussion in June, so I hope that everyone has the background that is needed to understand what I'm about to say. Anyway, I'll proceed. Good evening, Mayor, members of council, and city staff. My name is Vanessa Warren, and my husband and I own and operate The Ranch, which is a public riding stable in Oakville in its 43rd year of business. We are located on Burnham Thorpe Road, east of Bronte, west of the 16 Mile Creek, and just north of the 407. We farm, house livestock, and offer trail rides, camps, and lessons on 142 acres. We have been increasingly dealing with fighting kites, and more particularly, their hundreds of meters of cutting string for several years now. We have had minor injuries to horses and riders, and frankly, far too many serious near misses. This kite string has been caught in paddocks, across driveways, in trees, over buildings, and it is excessively hard to see until you are literally wrapped up in it. We've even recently had it clotheslined across trails at neck height, and we've had it caught up in farm machinery on multiple occasions. This summer, Selena Campbell, Manager of Enforcement Services, came to our farm and saw firsthand what we were dealing with. She saw multiple kites that I'd collected over the 2 weeks prior to her visit, hundreds of yards of very sharp cutting string, and even line that I'd not been able and still haven't been able to extricate from farm buildings and hydro wires spanning multiple properties on Burnham Thorpe Road. When Selena visited my farm, we discussed that one way a bylaw could be structured was to make the activity of flying kites illegal over a certain age, as with, for example, bike riding on sidewalks over the age of 12. I can tell you that having spoken with many groups of kite fighters over the years, none of them are children. These are all groups of grown men spending a sizable amount of time and money on the competition they're engaged in. Selena and I also discussed that unlike illegal dumping, for example, loosed kite string can't reasonably be expected to be the responsibility of a landowner, as you literally will only find it if you or others become entangled in it and cut by it. And there is no way to protect your property from it. In other words, I, as a property owner, can do nothing to mitigate the danger that this activity is exposing me, my riders, and my animals to. Selena mentioned during our discussion that there had already been an injury in an Oakville park when a woman cut her hand on kite string that was caught over a pedestrian bridge. What responsibility should the town of Oakville bear in that situation? And how culpable will the town be in the next injury if it doesn't ban fighting kites tonight? It is disappointing to me that our discussion seemed to have bore little fruit in this new report, except for perhaps the removal of the suggestion that property owners be responsible for the disposal of errant cutting line. This not properly disposed of thing is wild language. I want to be very clear here. The loose kites and their very lethal string have to cross over a conservation area, the 407 and Burnham Thorpe Road, to land on my property. In India, in January of this year, 6 people, including 3 children, died after their throats were cut by this type of kite string during one day of an annual kite festival. They bled to death. One of them was a 2-year-old girl who died after kite string struck her neck while she was riding a scooter. How long until something like this happens to someone on a motorcycle on the 407, a cyclist on Bronte Road, or a child on a scooter on Burnham Thorpe Road, or to an equestrian out for a hack on my farm? And are we willing to overlook death and injury to livestock, pets, and wildlife? I want to be really clear. There is no safe way to do this sport. I know proponents will say that they track these loose kites. They don't, because they simply cannot. I have been there, I have watched. Runners near, for example, the hospital cannot track a loose kite over Glenorchy Conservation, the 407, and onto private property, somehow protecting people and animals along that route. It is not possible. Reporting back in Q2 of 2024 will not bring you any more useful data than you have already before you. I'd also like to point out that the report you have before you mentions education, but omits advocacy, because Oakville is uniquely placed to advocate for this type of legislation regionally and provincially. And I would ask you to do so, because banning kite fighting in Oakville will push competitors to Milton and Burlington, et cetera. But the loosed kites and that cutting line will not obey municipal boundaries. This report states that you as council can ban kite fighting rather, if you deem it to be a public nuisance. But here's the bigger picture. If you do not ban fighting kites now, I guarantee you that someday you will be writing eponymous legislation named after the first Oakville kite string fatality. It is only a matter of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Warren. Councillor Elgar has a question for you, and then Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel.
Thank you. Through Mayor Burton to Ms. Warren. Ms. Warren, if we go with option 2, we will be banning fighting kites on private and public property. Would that work for you?
Yes, I would like to also add the advocacy piece, but yes, it absolutely has to be banned on both of those properties. And I don't think that it will be difficult to enforce at all. These kite fights tend to be very large gatherings. They're slow moving. Like I say, I've been there before multiple times. We tried for years to talk to kite fighters about the impacts of what they were doing. It didn't really change behavior at all, but they're not fast moving. They're not in the middle of Glenorchy. They're very much on the street, often trespassing on private property, and they are very large groups.
Thank you. You've answered my question.
Thank you.
Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Burton. Ms. Warren, thank you very much for explaining sort of the ground truth of what seems to occur. And what I'm taking away is that the trajectory of the kite is also something that is not within the kite flyers' real control. And therefore, even they, though they may say, I'm going to do everything to be safe, they don't have that control.
That's correct. And I think Jim Barry mentioned that they're cutting these kites. The object is to loose your opponent's kite, and they're cutting them at very high altitudes with meters and meters, hundreds of meters of very sharp string. So we don't know where they're going to end up. We've had incidents of wildlife being caught up already. And like I say, on our farm, it's really been an issue.
Thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you.
And now, Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you very much, Ms. Warren, for coming in. Do you know who's doing this? I mean, if we're beating around the bush a bit, is there one group, or do you know where it's coming from? So
No.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Apologies. No, and that's been another issue, is it's very much a whack-a-mole. Again, we really have tried to go out and meet with these groups of individuals, and we've tried through social media to connect with the kite flyers and kite fighters to try to, open a discussion and talk about how this could be done safely, or at least so that we could know when to look for kites, because that's the other problem, is to know when this activity has happened and when can I maybe scour the property. I've had no luck finding one kind of unified place, or even a few unified places where we could have those conversations online or elsewhere. It's not very organized.
And you are relatively close to Milton as well. Is there a possibility that it's happening in Milton and then coming down into Oakville, or getting caught down here?
Wind dependent, it can be in Milton, but more often than not, we've been dealing with it just north of the hospital. That tends to be a hot spot, but it certainly has also, if the wind shifted, it's certainly been an issue from Milton as well.
Okay, and then I guess the last thing, and it's always difficult for us to sort of try to explain how our bylaws work, and it's like a court. You need evidence, you have to wait for your court date, and then you prosecute that way, and it's very rarely we have time or we get conviction. And I wanted to make sure that you're aware of how our bylaw enforcement works and the difficulties with that, because a lot of people think, well, once the law is passed, everyone's going to follow it and we don't have this problem anymore, and unfortunately that tends not to be the case. So I just wanted to make sure that whatever we decide tonight, you're aware that this problem might still linger, whether it's legal or not. We have the problem with fireworks, and fireworks go off every time that outside of our laws, and it's difficult. I just wanted to see if you're aware of what the expectations are.
Certainly, I understand that a bylaw is just that. When we've had even discussions with police before around these groups, they could and would do nothing because there was no bylaw. And I think a lot of these individuals are quite lovely law-abiding citizens. And so I understand that there will always be rule breakers, but I think the message is really important. And I think for the majority of people, this work will curtail what is a very unsafe sport.
Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Ms. Warren, for your comments and your report on the issues you're having, and I can appreciate the frustration. I guess the question I have on the enforcement side, when you have this issue, do you see these kites in the air at times that you can identify? Because I think the challenge we're going to have is with respect to getting there on a timely basis to see what's going on. So do you have the identity to see those kites in the air so you can contact our bylaw enforcement?
We certainly have had, like I said, I've managed to go and chat with these groups multiple times. Not always, though. Certainly, that's the danger, is that when I don't know the activity is happening, and then I end up with kites on the property and I don't know to expect them. But they do happen. I mean, they generally happen in the evening. They're very visible. You can see the kites up in the air. I often have people calling me and saying they're flying kites, and so I'll go over and have a chat. So they are. It is possible to inform them of new bylaws and do that bylaw work for sure. Not every time, but I think the message is really important, and I think to be able to even have police assist in shutting it down.
And do you, when you've had these discussions with the residents, not the residents, but the kite flyers, are they the same organization or group of individuals?
No, they're not. And again, they're not really. They don't seem to be very they're very loosely organized. They're certainly not formally organized. I mean, they must be organized within themselves because there's lots of money and lots of kites being built. There's certainly, I know we've looked into places where you can purchase all these materials, and this string is, it's gobsmacking to me that it's legal to purchase. So there are those ways, I guess, that they're communicating through those groups, but it's not formally organized.
Could it be suggested because of the bylaws in Mississauga and Toronto, they're moving westerly into Oakville because we don't have a bylaw?
It's possible, but I also think, the community is growing, and I think we have lots of space for them to quietly participate in this without being in parks, quite frankly, because they're not, as far as I know, they're not in the parks. So it is a rural issue.
So in your experience, the kite flyers are on private property. Is it their property, their own property, or are they encroaching on somebody else's private property?
Yeah, we've played trespass games where they're at a private piece of private property across from the hospital, and then the police tell them they're trespassing, so they just kind of move onto the road allowance, or we sort of have been playing whack-a-mole that way, but it has been private property that I'm aware of.
And the groups that you've talked to, are they 5, 10, 15? How many individuals are involved with this?
It can be 50 to 100 on warm summer nights. Yeah, no, it can be very busy. It can be much smaller too, but there are large groups, and they're often they have vehicles full of kites, so they're flying and loosing multiple kites in an event.
Thank you, Ms. Warren, for your comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor McNeice, your turn.
Through your worship to Ms. Warren or staff, do we know if there's this, so it sounds like the string is really the issue. I'm just wondering about where it's coming from, the supply of it. Do we know, are there vendors in Oakville? Should that also be something that's regulated, or is it something that's purchased online and shipped here?
If that's a question to me, my understanding is it's all online, but I don't have further information on that at all.
Mr. Barry, do you have any additional information?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's the information we have too. I understand that most of the string is ordered in specifically for this. It does come from, I think we've found 3 at least specialty locations where it can be ordered in from. But I suspect that licensing it wouldn't be an option.
Okay, thank you.
All righty. Well, we've certainly heard from a lot of people on this evening. I'd just like to say that there is this theory in self-protection called see something, say something. And it's a big part of community policing. And here we have a case where it looks like the see something, say something model will actually work in that we got large crowds, they've got a favorite spot, we know where it is, and all that's missing is the ability for us to act when somebody like Ms. Warren sees something and says something. So I'm inclined to support the option 2 approach that Councillor Elgar has been advocating here.
Mayor Burton, if you want to move it, I'd be more than happy to pass it over to you. That would be even better.
I don't want to pass the chair, but I am allowed to vote, so I thought I'd be allowed to indicate my feelings about it.
I appreciate that. So if it's the appropriate time, I would be moving option 2. And I thank staff for putting in option 2 and also writing I think it's Appendix B bylaw for option 2, which will satisfy all the concerns we have.
Your motion's in order and it's accepted, and you don't need a second because we're in committee of the whole. And for Ms. Warren, if she's still hearing us, at a later date, I believe advocacy might come along in the form of an advocacy resolution. That's a kind of resolution where council asks the government of Ontario or the government of Canada as may be appropriate to do something. And Councillor Elgar has written some of those before, so I don't imagine he'll need any help. Council, let me ask if anybody opposes Councillor Elgar's motion. Madam Clerk, no one opposes it. It passes unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Council, next we have a presentation from Kendall Wayo, who's the Director of Facility Services, and that is in aid of a motion that staff proceed with devising the programming and building requirements for a new town hall on our existing site in time to still have a town hall before the bridge goes through this building. Mr. Wayo, we look forward to your information.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Thank you for allowing a presentation on the relocation of Town Hall. Oakville's Town Hall at 1225 Trafalgar Road dates back to the 60s and is situated in a prime transportation corridor along Trafalgar Road and close to the Oakville GO station and QEW Highway. The existing Town Hall site is also close to the upcoming Midtown Oakville Urban Growth Center, which is set to attract more housing, employment growth, and seamless transit connections. A new road will run parallel to Trafalgar Road, connecting White Oaks Boulevard and Midtown at the future extension of Cross Avenue. The need for this road was identified through the Midtown Oakville Class Environmental Assessment, which was completed in 2014. You can see the new proposed road as the blue line, going through the existing site in red. The new road set to be constructed will pass right through the existing town hall building, shown dotted in small right on the east side of the site. This road is not currently in the 10-year forecast, but is an important access point to Midtown from north of the QEW. The road network is being reviewed and reconfirmed through the Midtown implementation strategy, including the timing for construction. This presents an opportunity to reimagine, redefine, and reconstruct a new and improved town hall. The vision for the new town hall is to create a future-proof, technologically advanced, environmentally conscious facility that supports a hybrid work environment and publicly accessible event and gathering spaces. The new town hall will prioritize accessibility, inclusivity, and smart technologies while aligning with Oakville's goal of achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050. The design of the new town hall will harmonize with the existing architectural character of Oakville, incorporating local materials and architectural elements. It will create a landmark structure that stands out as a civic symbol and contributes to the town's identity, and it will integrate opportunities for public art installations within the building and the surrounding area. When looking at options, We are looking for a site that is easily accessible and convenient for public, members of council and staff. A site that is well-known and easily recognizable by the public, and a site that can provide adequate parking facilities and accommodate various active transportation modes such as walking, cycling, and public transportation. Ideally, the site is already part of the town's portfolio. This eliminates the need for substantial land acquisition costs and simplifies the timing and complexity of developing the site. Alternate sites at Centennial Square, Midtown, and Uptown Core were considered as potential sites for a new town hall, but were ultimately eliminated due to site size, land ownership, and timing and availability. Staff are recommending exploring the option of locating the new town hall on the existing site of 1225 Trafalgar Road, just west of the new road construction. So the pink sort of triangle shape on the diagram. The current town hall site offers advantages in terms of convenience and accessibility for residents, members of council, and staff. It ensures a smooth transition of operations and minimizes disruption to existing administrative processes. The town already owns 1225 Trafalgar Road. This eliminates the need for significant acquisition costs, and using the site will result in substantial cost savings during construction and development of the new town hall. The existing location has already gained public recognition over time. Residents and visitors are accustomed to assessing town services at this site. Choosing a familiar location helps maintain continuity and ease the transition for the public, as they will not have to adjust to a completely new address for town hall services. East of the road will be master planned to ensure land use, density, connectivity, and public spaces are balanced with the construction of the new road and new town hall. Special attention will be paid to the existing greenbelt areas to the east and south to ensure nature is preserved. To meet the deadline of having a new town hall operational by the late 2020s to support the new road construction, staff are recommending proceeding with a site analysis at 1225 Trafalgar Road and developing a blocking and stacking plan for the new town hall in 23 and 24. This pre-design work is foundational, technical, and a very important first step of this multi-year project. As part of the 23 capital budget, Council has approved approximately $250,000 for a feasibility study for a new town hall. So, after the feasibility study is complete, which is step one, the town will then hire a consultant to build on the results of the feasibility study and develop a design for the new town hall, step two. The new town hall will then be built, and after staff are relocated to the new town hall, the existing town hall will be demolished to make way for the new road, steps 3 to 5. As the project progresses, we will provide regular reports to council and keep the public informed at key project milestones. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much, sir. And look, you've got almost half of council lined up with questions, and I'm sure more will follow. Councillor Duddick, you get to lead.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. I don't know if this is something that maybe be able to be answered by yourself or someone else on staff. My only question is in terms of the timing, especially given the fact we're currently going through regional and various other reviews by the province, and we currently have Halton Region Center that's built. I'm just wondering if we're being a little premature in starting so quickly. I know you mentioned that the money has already been allocated in the budget for this feasibility, but I'm just wondering in terms of the urgency, are we down to like months that we have to implement something?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The feasibility study is really our homework that we're doing to prepare. So we know our new road is going to come through at some point in time.
Correct.
And we want to do our homework to make sure that we're not caught off guard. So the work that we're doing is preliminary to look for a suitable site that we will be able to develop a plan for when we know that the road gets firmed up.
Okay, so what kind of time frame are we looking at for the feasibility? You'd shown the timeline there. You anticipate 4 or 5 months maybe for it to be completed, or earlier than that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's exactly that. It's about half a year, so 4 to 6 months to do the feasibility study. And the feasibility study is you're not going to have any fancy plans of cool buildings with lots of glass and anything. It is all the foundational work, the non-flashy stuff that says, okay, the building can go here. This is how we're going to, handle water on the site. This is how the sun angles work. And a blocking and stacking diagram, which is all the boring stuff, but definitely necessary stuff that says, okay, in our town hall, we need to have a council chamber. The council chamber has to be able to handle so many people. We need to have offices. We need offices for so many things. So it's not really about design. It's about doing our homework to make sure that we can define a site or find a site that will be able to support all of the needs that a town hall has to supply for the public.
Okay, so you've indicated that you've looked at various other sites, but you really think from the cost effectiveness, the fact we own the property, it makes sense to relocate on the property. So is the feasibility study then just to analyze that development or plan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it is the site at 1225 Trafalgar Road. Okay. One, it's already owned by the town, so yep, we would not have to buy it. But probably another strong point for this site is people are already familiar with this site. They know, hey, where do I go for town services? I come to 1225 Trafalgar Road. And the other good thing is you can have the existing town hall operating, build the new town hall, and then at the appropriate time, it won't be as simple as this, but you pick up the boxes and you move them across the parking lot into the new building. So we're not carting them down the road or to some other location far away.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. I would point out that the regional building is bigger than our needs. We don't own it, and there's no reason to believe that it would be given to us. And in Peel, they're having an argument over the Peel Police Building. The premise there is, because it's in Mississauga, that if there would be 2 police forces, Brampton wants to be paid for its share of the building of the Peel Police Building that's in Mississauga so that they can build another one. So there's no reason to believe that we're going to get any freebies. That's all I wanted to try to point out. All right, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Adams, Councillor Giddings, and Councillor O'Meara. Councillor Chisholm, you're up.
Thank you, Worship. Just, I think for clarity, since this new building will be built and so forth, with the existing staff that we have in Town Hall now, are you saying they will be there until they just pick up their boxes and their computer and they're going to walk across the street and go into the new building? Are they going to be there through all this construction in an old building, in the existing building? Is that correct?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, in general terms, yes, that is the simplest plan. You're going to keep the existing operations going. So one, it's fiscally responsible, but we will have to have construction mitigation plans to deal with the dust, deal with all of the noise and things like that. But yeah, that would be the plan. Keep the old building operating, and then when the new building is functional, then we move people over to the new building.
May I suggest, I went through this once before with town hall, and when we were at town hall, we had all move out, bug out because of construction. So I'm hoping within this budget and within the plans that we look at a mitigation with respect to moving temporary positions for staff at different locations in the town, because I really have difficulty understanding how that's going to happen, where you have the existing staff, well, whatever number that at that time is moving across the street into a new building with the old one there, knowing it's going to be demolished and so forth. I think we're going to have a lot of challenges with that concept of doing that. So I would be very wary with that and look at the mitigation, how we have to move people and move staff into other satellite locations for a temporary basis, and to also maintain our service levels with the community. It's going to be a real challenge. My last question is with respect to us. Just, I know we're I'm probably way ahead of the curve on this one, but I saw just the diagram. We have some very large parking space in Town Hall now. What happens with this building going? It looks like it's going into the existing parking space and probably some of the other well, I'll call the green space. To develop that. Where's the parking going to happen to accommodate the town hall?
Through you, Mayor Burton. Those are excellent questions, Councillor, and those are the questions that we need to deal with in this first part of the study to get an understanding of what are some of the options. You had spoken about the challenges of keeping staff within this building while the other is being constructed. That certainly is a challenge. But those are the kinds of things we're going to look at. Those are options in front of us. It's always better if we can do that, but how well does it work? So we're at a very high level right now, really just trying to understand what can fit on the site, what's feasible, what are some of the options that we have. So then that gives us enough information to then move forward to the next step. So you'll hear about those results once we finish that feasibility study. So you have a good understanding at a very high level where we're thinking the options would best be placed.
Thanks, Jane. I appreciate it. Look forward to the next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Adams.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much to the staff for the report. I fully support the direction that you're going. And I just have a couple of questions about the next steps in the process that'll be going forward. The first is really a bit of feedback on the list of existing functional requirements that you've included within the report. And I think it's already envisioned, but it's not explicit, and that's ensuring that the new town hall site would address both the Trafalgar frontage as well as the new road frontage. First of all, so that it's an inviting urban environment. I imagine this is going to be a much more urban structure than what we've got right now, but also because we've got transit access that'll happen on both sides, and I think it's important that the site be accessible using transit, and there's I think an ability to make that a really inviting kind of location. The other question I had for you is about the remnant parcel plan. So you actually showed in your overheads, I think it may have been third or fourth slide back, where you showed the parcels that were on the other side of the new road, essentially where we are right now. What's the process for looking at those remnant parcels, and how is that going to be determined? And a corollary question to that is, the report cites a set of public engagement opportunities. What does staff imagine that looking like going forward in terms of the next steps?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, definitely your questions about active transportation and about siting of how the building looks and looks onto Trafalgar Road, looks onto the other roads, will definitely be taken into account, both from a site analysis standpoint, and then when we get further along in the design and the building starts getting developed, it will be able to address those issues. But one, we know active transportation and public transportation is very important, is an important element to the town. So those are definitely key elements as part of this design. Second question you had was what happens on the east side of the road, which is where this building is now, and then goes down into the valley area that runs along east and then south of the existing site. That will be developed in conjunction with the planning department, and special care is going to be taken to make sure that the density or whatever is proposed for the site, whether it is in keeping with or make sure that nature is preserved where it can be, and that part of the site is developed in conjunction and symbiotically with the new road in the town hall just to the west of the road.
And then the last bit of the question was, how are the public going to get to be engaged? Yeah. What's the process for that? And the timing for that? Absolutely.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The public will be engaged at key milestones, and regular reports will be given both to council and to the public. The timing for that, we don't have the exact timing for it because right now we're just in the very early stages of doing our homework.
So in this early stage, the next 4 to 6 month period that we're doing sort of this blocking plan, would the public be involved in that at all? Or is it only when we get to the next stage of determining a little bit more of the detail?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor.
I was just going to add, I think that the question, there will be public consultation. There needs to be a bit of a master plan approach on this particular site to understand how it is. So certainly through the planning process, there'd be consultation. And I think we are still kind of working through that consultation steps in terms of how we pull that together. And that'll be very much part of the RFP process.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the answers. I would look forward to working with staff to make sure the project is a success and that it works well with the local neighbors and that you get good buy-in and those kinds of things. So to the extent that there are next steps there, I'd be happy to take part in those discussions. And Your Worship, I'd be happy to move the recommendation at the appropriate time.
All right, thank you. Noted. The next speaker is Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I can appreciate the large number of moving pieces in this project. In terms of the flyover, it's a crucial part of Midtown infrastructure with everything that's going on there. It would be great if we could have further information on timing, unless you know it now. If we're looking at late 2020s, I'd be curious in terms of possible build date for that flyover. Would it, pending funding and everything else, would it be immediately following that? The timing is pretty critical if we expect Midtown to be able to function as we would like.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we are, as Kendall mentioned, confirming the timing and phasing for the road network through the Midtown implementation strategy. But we have looked at that and we are expecting that we would need to start work on that road around the 2029 timeline with things like pre-grading and utilities and all of that. So that has led to the timing of Kendall's study, and that's how we have sort of staged the road planning and design timeline.
2029?
Yes. So we had the relocation of, through you, Mr. Mayor, the relocation of Town Hall being complete for 2028. So then the next step, as you mentioned, would be to move into that design planning and construction timeline.
Thanks, Jill. And that would there'll be further details to come as part of our Midtown meetings, I take it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct. That'll be confirmed through that process.
Great, thank you very much. And Mr. Mayor, I appreciate your comments about Regional Hall. If Queen's Park were in a generous mood at some point in the in the next year or so, depending on what happens. Would that be something that could be discussed just to look at potential costs or?
If Santa Claus wants to give us a gift, we will gratefully receive it. But if you look at what's going on, there's no real foundation for any such hope that I can see.
You always consider yourself the eternal optimist. I guess it's just rubbing off on me.
I always ask.
Thank you.
But I don't want to, I don't like to plan. I'll just remind you of the many years of promises by the federal government to give us the post office. And we know how that turned out.
Point
Later
well
on
taken.
tonight, you're going to discover that there's a little catch in the Bronte Waterfront Heritage Park transfer of the same nature. So, as I have said many times, they don't give a lot of stuff to Oakville. They take a lot of stuff from Oakville. With that little humorous aside, we can resume the parade. Councilor O'Meara, you're next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I'd like to understand a little bit more from staff on why we took Centennial Square out of the picture. I know one of the main reasons for here is we already own the land. Well, we own that land too. And I'm wondering what value did we get on this property that could have helped finance maybe a move to another place that we own? And I'd also like your comments on the need to make Town Hall more accessible and go to where the people are rather than have the people have to come to where we are. I was envisioning at Centennial Square, Town Hall, if it ever gets cold enough, skating on the creek again, music on the riverside. We would be down near where an art gallery might be, down where a new library. I mean, it's bringing Town Hall and making it accessible to a cultural hub, to where people are. Here it seems, again, we're keeping an arm's length, and the only reason people will come up here is if they have to come to Town Hall for something. So I'd like to understand more why we took Centennial Square out of the picture, and other than just, well, we own this property, because we own that property too.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe I'll answer that, because we had done a fair amount of work when we worked on the DCH, looking at a possibility of putting a town hall on the Centennial Square site, and actually went to the extent of drawing it to see how it could fit. We used, I think it was the Kitchener City Hall, in order to see how it could fit and how it could work. What we did find is that it took up a considerable portion of the site, which meant it eliminated the opportunity for a theater and the park and the other types of elements that we were looking at for the downtown cultural hub. So in Kendall's report, he identifies the size as a requirement. And so the size was one thing that we had ruled out for the Centennial Square location. There was also a considerable amount of concern about traffic and increasing things in the downtown through that work, but predominantly it's the size of the site and the other facilities we wanted to locate downtown to support that cultural hub that we felt ruled out the Centennial Square site.
Okay, and that work, again, was that done before COVID or after COVID? I think it was before COVID, the
Oh yeah,
cultural hub.
no, it was definitely done before
So
COVID.
we've re-looked at that with maybe hybrid working model numbers, like yeah.
And in fact, the model that we use for the Kitchener, because I think a lot of the facilities, the footprint that we used was most of the public buildings. So the clerk's building, the council chambers, those kinds of things. So minimizing the footprint that could go on that site to more of the public facing buildings, and then you'd be putting administration in other locations. So even at that extent, it was very crowded on the site and eliminated the opportunity for the other cultural hub elements.
And is that because it was just a wide footprint, or it was too high? I mean, I've seen in Toronto, they could put 90-story buildings on a 30 by 30 footprint. So I'm wondering, when we talk about the size of the footprint and we didn't have space for it there, like was it only a 3-story and it was just a massing issue, or?
We actually took an example of, I think it was the Kitchener City Hall, and laid that onto the site to see it work. And it's a multiple story building. But again, it was most of the public facing elements of it and not the total extent of a town hall.
Okay, and I don't know what the Kitchener model is, but is it much bigger than the Burlington Town Hall model? Because that seems to be stuck right into a small little area there, but they go pretty high up in
I
Burlington.
can follow up with the square footage and
Yeah.
the information that we had on it at a later date. I don't have that on the
Okay,
top.
no, that's fine. And then my last question is just with regards to sort of surrounding the building with roads. And how many lanes will the new roadway be?
Through you, Mayor Burton, in the EA, that road was a 4-lane cross-section. But as we said, we're confirming all of that through the ongoing Midtown work. It would have facilities for all modes, cycling, walking, transit, and vehicle cars.
So are we worried that we're sort of putting an island around Town Hall on both sides, where it's 6 lanes on one side and 4 lanes on another side, and it's going to be hard for people? I know there's obviously traffic lights and these sorts of things, but are we worried that we're sort of hiving off where Town Hall is going to be with the layout of meeting it in between 2 roadways there?
Through you, Mayor Burton, I think that's part of what we can assess as we look at the blocking and stacking. How does it fit? How does it work? Recognizing that we've got 2 major arterial roads on either side. If that study that we're doing as the next step demonstrates that it really is not functional, we'll be back to you to see whether or not we should be considering site. At our look at it at this point in time, there's enough space there to be able to design a building, and architecturally, we have an architect as a director of our facility services can look at great designs that would still do all of the things that we would like to do for a town hall.
Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Haslett-Deal.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Burton. Is there a projected cost for rebuilding Town Hall?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, we don't have a projected cost. That, again, would come in the feasibility study, the next piece of work that we want to proceed with.
Okay, thank you for that. And just in terms of the flyover, do we have written confirmation from MTO that they are going to support the build of that crossover?
Through you, Mayor Burton, MTO was an active participant in the EA and will be again in the implementation study that we're working now. Because we are still at that early stage, we have not done things like applied for permits or that. But we are continuing to meet with them, so they are very aware that this is where we're headed with the Midtown Road improvements. But we do not have a permit or anything like that in hand to do the construction.
And is it a shared cost?
Through you, Mayor Burton, the implementation, including the funding mechanisms, is all still to be confirmed.
So we know that, at least last reported, that Metrolinx has not given us a thumbs up on extending the platform to the eastern side of Cross Avenue. We're planning for our crossover to come and bring those buses along to that section still. We call it the Gears area, but you know the piece of land I'm talking about. So we're going to have to pay for that road, which will get the buses off Trafalgar. But will they be stopping on the eastern side, even though we won't have an eastern platform?
Through you, Mayor Burton, that, sorry, no.
So first I'll just clarify the question regarding the flyover and the MTO sharing. We have put into the rationalization study with the region and request them to put it as through their DC bylaw, and that was passed a few years back. So we're looking for cost sharing with the region on that particular link. And regarding the question on where the bus will be stopping, that will be evaluated through the implementation study of Midtown and the overall transportation master plan for Midtown.
Okay. So sometime in 2029, we'll have a road and hopefully we will have permits from MTO, and we'll have answers on where those buses are going to, how the buses are going to be facilitated. Because one of the primary reasons we're doing all this is to make sure that that intersection and that flow optimizes other lands for better use. I think is what I would say.
That's correct.
Okay. And then I guess a resident sent a note just about in terms of the build out of Town Hall, if there was any consideration depending on height and design, if housing would be part of it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we had not considered any housing as part of the town, or we had not envisioned thinking about residential as part of the town hall development at this time.
Okay. And did you have a height that you really had no thoughts on that at this point?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, we haven't yet, and that's what the site analysis and the blocking and stacking diagram is really going to tell us. Like, how do we make use of the site to the best of its ability, so we can get a development that engages the street, talks to the street. We don't just want like a 6-lane road and this building with its back to the road, and the two don't interact with each other. We want we want the building to interact with the street, to interact with the sidewalks, and be a vibrant part of Oakville. So that's why we need to do this first site analysis to figure out where is the best part, or where is the best place on the site for the building. Is it a little setback from Trafalgar? Is it closer to Trafalgar? How tall should we make the thing? How much square footage do we need? So that's all the next package of work that we need to do.
Thank you. This conversation always brings out more information, and I appreciate it.
Councillor McNeice.
Thank you. Through your worship, I know some alternate sites were considered likely before my time, but I was just wondering if Bronte Village was considered at all. I mean, we have some large parcels that have not been developed. I realize they're not under town ownership, but we don't have a civic institution in Bronte Village, the proper area. And it could be the type of catalyst project that could be mixed use and have, the parking structure we need combined with office space that would sort of be a town hall. And similar to, similar footprint to Burlington or Kitchener as well, and have much more of an urban kind of walkable format. So I was just wondering if that was looked at all or is being considered.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we hadn't considered Bronte. I think we saw Trafalgar Road as being a central spine within the town as itself. And so we were looking at those locations in the downtown, kind of Middletown, and then the uptown area that had historically been looked at as potential locations for a town hall. They also offered the opportunity, at least in 2 of those locations, for town-owned lands. So those were the 3 sites that we had considered in bringing this recommendation to you, that we should look at this site in order to go forward.
All right, Councillor Knoll and then Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Worship. And first of all, greetings from beautiful St. John's, Newfoundland, here at the Canadian Association of Police Governance Conference. I'm curious about the Uptown Core elimination. I know that when the Uptown Core was first conceptualized 25 or so years ago, one of the key elements was some form of institutional use. Now, I believe in the early days, it was going to be a large high school campus. We've talked about putting a library there, and it seems that one after another, they get eliminated over time. And I'm curious, why did we not consider the Uptown Core? We happen to own a very large parcel of land right there, the old Public Works property. And while I know that we've worked out arrangements with the Municipal Development Corporation, I'm sure that Mr. Mineri would be happy to swing a deal with us should that be a possibility. But when you think about the Uptown Core, you've got a wonderfully, alive area that would provide, shopping and dining and all kinds of opportunities for staff, and a much more I guess, robust, more campus-like feel. So I'm curious, why was that eliminated? Because I know that that was always something that we had anticipated, some form of institutional use there. And this seems like the perfect opportunity about to disappear.
We had looked at the Uptown because, as you say, it had always been considered when the Uptown plans were done to have a municipal or a focus within the Uptown. For similar reasons, we had actually looked at location within Midtown when we've done the Midtown work of a town hall within there. But I think the key elements are the sizes of sites, the public ownership, which narrowed the options down. You're quite right about Uptown. It has the public works site. We felt that we'd moved too far on the public works land with the design, the work that we'd been working on with the Municipal Development Corporation, to turn back and accommodate the town hall on that site when it delivers so much of the housing that we're looking at, we felt was inappropriate. And that's what, in fact, this is why the recommendation is in front of you today, because it's a fundamental decision to decide where you want your town hall. So we had eliminated those other sites, thinking that this site was a better site, centrally located, publicly owned, has the capacity to accommodate it, and it has been recognized as the town hall location for quite some time. We thought those factors were more key and then eliminated the other locations as a recommendation for you today.
Well, I mean, we have this recommendation in front of us today, and it may be too late to revisit it, but I just feel that some of those reasons you've given, for example, the housing piece, it seems that you could swap one for the other. You could probably very easily accommodate the housing that you lose on the Uptown Core properties on what could be a future development of that property on the old town hall property very easily. Councillor Hasler-Thiel mentioned the concept of blending in housing in the concept as well. You could very easily build housing above the town hall portions of the complex. I just feel that it's a great opportunity that's being lost in an area which was always contemplated, as you've even stated, to have a municipal presence of some form there. It would be literally the icing on the cake, I believe, to help really push the Uptown Core to fulfill its destiny as being a true uptown, which would provide that whole package, the animation, the parking, the other facilities on the property, and the concerns that Councillor Chisholm was raising. For example, how do you live with a building and no parking and the inconvenience? You could very easily build the building starting as soon as you could do the plans and have it ready to go without inconveniencing staff or the public in the old center. Anyway, I just think it's worth a second look. I'm not sure how to ask you to do that without being contrary to the current motion, but I think it's something that somebody should sharpen the pencil and really give serious consideration to further, because I think it's the ideal location considering all the factors: public ownership, access, Trafalgar Spine. We have a public transit node right in the Uptown Core as well. I forgot that piece. So we have the whole package. Now I'm starting to sound like a real estate salesman.
Thank you, Agent Knoll. Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Your Worship. Jane, this is probably a question for you. I'm looking at the picture of the location of the road, and if we've landed, contrary to what Councillor Knoll was saying, maybe looking at a different location, but is there a way of the road moving to the parking lot area and keeping the building and renovating the building as part of the feasibility study? So instead of incurring all the expense, can the road be moved and work with what we have existing? Just a
Through you, Mayor Burton, I think this is better answered by
I'm not an engineer, so
yeah.
thank you, Director Stephen.
Through you, Mayor Burton. When we completed the Midtown EA, we did look at a number of different alignments for the road, and one of the factors was the intersection alignment and setup and spacing, and to sort of straighten that out so it runs very parallel to Trafalgar would create a very awkward intersection there, which would be problematic from a safety and operational standpoint.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to ask because just looking at the map, it looked like, can you move it forward? And if it isn't meeting from a traffic perspective, I get that, but could avoid some of the expense of having to build brand new.
To translate, it would land in a bad spot if you did it that way. Councillor Shi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just want to express my idea about this. So I'm fully support this report from staff, and I believe this existing town hall places is ideally placed. The staff recommended. So this is already very familiar for all the residents, and it's almost in the middle of our town, and especially. During the presentation, I noticed there's a further development for the second phase. Maybe that's on the other side of the road. I like this idea. It can be provide more possibilities, future development in the future for the new town hall. Many years ago, later, yeah. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. All right, Council, thank you very much for the in-depth discussion. I'd like to call a vote. Is there anyone who wants to object to Councillor Adams' motion? Congratulations, Councillor Adams, your motion carries. That brings us to the 2023 priority intergovernmental requests. It's a very timely report because if you approve what staff have proposed, we'll be able to use them at AMO as we, those of us who will be at the convention near the end of August in London for the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. As I think all of us know, most of the government of Ontario attends to hear, or at least look like they want to hear what we have to say. And it would be nice to be able to say that what we're asking for is endorsed by council. So I hope with that, you'll give Swaj Mann, our Manager of Corporate Strategy, your attention as he walks you through the famous, many of you will remember the one sheets that the region perfected so many years ago. And this is us following in that and coming up with our own one sheets to hand to ministers and staff. Swaj?
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. Yes, this is a very timely opportunity to provide an update on our priority intergovernmental requests, which are, as you noted, asks that we have as a town from other levels of government. As background, sorry, next slide, please. One more, thank you. As background, council approved a list of priority intergovernmental requests in March 2022 as part of efforts to focus and align our requests to other levels of government with our vision, our priorities, and our needs. At that time, we noted that thanks to the leadership efforts of the community, the mayor, and members of council, there were a number of achievements that demonstrated the value of productively engaging other levels of government, including funding for electric buses, the conservation of the Glen Abbey golf course lands, and other successes. Since that initial list was approved, staff in commissions and departments have worked to provide briefs and materials to support members of council and others in discussions with other levels of government, including at forums such as AMO, as noted, and FCM, and of course, AMO is coming up again this month. Over time, we've seen shifts in the internal and external landscape that require us to update our requests, including shifting community needs, policy changes, emerging issues, ongoing planning at the departmental level, and some requests that have either been fully or partially completed, which we'll get into. In addition, council also approved its new long-term strategy at the July council meeting, including a new vision of a vibrant and livable community for all, as well as new strategic priorities that make this an opportune time for a review and update of our requests. Next slide, please. This slide shows an overview of the new list of priority intergovernmental requests with the full text and details associated with each provided in Appendix A of the staff report. Each request has been reviewed and updated based on discussions with the town's executive leadership team and departments and is aligned to one of the 4 strategic priorities in council's new long-term strategy and associated action plan for this term of council. As a recap, those are growth management, accountable government, environmental sustainability, and community belonging. Next slide, please. In recognition of various factors, including those emerging issues, shifting needs, policy changes, and movement or closure on some of the requests, here we are highlighting some of the key changes. For instance, the Bronte Harbor acquisition request has been adjusted in light of the province releasing its reversionary interest in the land in December. We've also updated the request related to parkland to include the conveyance of key provincial lands, including the parkway lands and provincial lands within the Greenbelt. We've also removed a couple of the requests, including those relating to housing affordability in light of the housing strategy and action plan, including the Housing Accelerator Fund application, and the Burl Oak Drive grade separation as a result of the revised cost-sharing agreement with Metrolinx and municipal partners. We've also added a couple of new requests based on either prior direction from council or consultation with the executive leadership team, including one related to regulations for companies towing from private property and ensuring consumer protection from predatory towing and public safety. There's also a new request to ensure municipalities are made whole from any financial shortfall experienced by municipalities for growth-related infrastructure projects due to Bill 23, as well as new requests related to the display and distribution of objectionable images. Overall, this approach to coordinate our intergovernmental requests will continue to help direct future actions and strengthen partnerships with all governments, as well as support efforts to collaborate with and align with other municipalities, networks, associations, and organizations. The list provided in Appendix A will continue to be refined and updated on an ongoing basis to ensure that we continue to align the request with strategic directions and priorities. Staff is also preparing or has already updated briefs on these requests on a priority basis to support those discussions with representatives of other levels of government, which will continue to be hosted on the council portal and will be uploaded this week. Next slide, please. We're happy to address any questions or hear any comments as we bring forward the recommendation that the requests identified in the appendix be approved. Thank you, Your Worship and members of council.
Thank you. Your prayers have been answered. The hands are going up faster than I can count them. Councillor Gidding, yours first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, under Midtown Oakville, the third bullet, expanding access to the Oakville GO station on both the east and west sides of Trafalgar Road, enabling improved bus connections and enhancing the last mile of travel. Further to the previous discussion, would that be the flyover included in that request?
I might actually, through you, Your Worship, I might actually refer that to Commissioner Fu.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. The Midtown request includes all the infrastructure that's within the Midtown network, as well as the station, either on the east and the west side. So it's all the infrastructure that we're asking for a higher level of government to provide some financial assistance.
So it doesn't have to be broken down to specifics. It's the whole meal deal.
That's correct.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just to, so it didn't fall off in case it did, this council passed a resolution to ask the federal government to put back a lighthouse at the Bronte Outer Harbour Pier. And I think that kind of fell off a little bit. So maybe we can just add that in our discussions with the Bronte Outer Harbour, that we continue to push the federal government to put back the pier that was iconic in our heritage waterfront area. Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor O'Meara. Councillor McNeice.
Thank you, through Your Worship. Appreciate the towing being on here, and I just wanted to emphasize the timeliness of it with Councillor O'Meara and I have met with the MPP on it, and I believe there's an early January deadline. I'm starting to get a little anxious that we haven't gotten feedback on what proposed regulations are going to look like, and we may lose some of our powers to regulate towards the end of the year. I know the advocacy letter has been sent to the Ministry of Transportation, but it'd sort of be good to know that they've heard us and, you know, having some indication that they've worked on it. So just wanted to add the timeliness of that being January 2024 is just around the corner. Would love to hear, you know, in the future that they've received it and here's what it may look like. So thank you.
Councillor, we'll be using this in August, so we'll get there. Councillor Chisholm?
Well, here I go. I hope I can add something to the list. I don't know if it's appropriate this time, but the challenge we're having, and I'd like to see something go to the Ministry of Transportation and Communication with respect to noise emissions from high performance vehicles and aftermarket exhaust systems that are plaguing our neighborhoods and also our main streets. And I don't think this is just a municipal of Oakville issue, but I think it's an issue in a lot of other municipalities. I don't know how we can identify that or add this to the list, but we need to have the provincial and federal to look at this because it is becoming a serious issue of noise levels.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hazlet-Deal.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mayor Burton. Well, actually, I concur with Councillor Chisholm that finding a way to get the provincial government to lower the noise decibel level that's acceptable so the Halton Regional Police can take further action on these kind of out of control mufflers, et cetera, is a point to be raised. Though we have such a long list, sometimes I think we have to say what are the top 5, but I won't take us down that path tonight. My question is simple. I know we took housing not on the list because we have the housing accelerator and there's other work, but clearly it's on the list for Halton Region. And it is a big message around helping to deliver needed, assisted, and supportive housing. So is there, and I might look to you, Mayor Burton, but others who may be invited to those minister meetings, is there a coordination of what Halton is saying with what Oakville is saying around housing?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you give us a little more than yes, ma'am? Though I always like yes, ma'am, sir. It's just wonderful.
The aspects of housing that you mentioned are part of the housing duties of the region of Halton and not of and not our jurisdiction. And they're expensive. And you could, and if you wish for Oakville to also have them, you're wishing for extra expense on the property tax. So I think it's good enough the way it is. The region of Halton asks for those things, and we ask for the parts that we work with.
So for clarity, my question is, when you're in discussions, are you with Halton Region as well with the minister, or are you meeting with them separately?
Well, because I'm both a Halton council member and an Oakville council member, I'm always both when I'm talking to any minister.
So for further clarity, will these one-pagers that we've received for the region be part of the discussion points with the minister?
Yes, of course.
On your part? Okay, thanks
Yes,
very much.
They always are.
Thank you.
We try for efficiency. Councillor Nando.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the report. I just had a question on the community infrastructure and how it says that we're requesting the province to build schools at an appropriate funding level. How do we tell the province that we need our community infrastructure with the housing development to actually balance them both? So we have now received funding and we are getting more schools built. We're now getting our community center built. But how do we relay the information to the government that we need there to be a balance between them wanting to build 1.5 million homes, but I don't hear a lot of discussion of how we're supposed to put the appropriate infrastructure in to balance it. Is that something that we can ask of the government?
Councillor, every time I see the Minister of Education, I raise that point. And gratifyingly, he has been telling me that they get that. And that's why they've, under this government, built so many new schools. And that I don't want to steal his thunder, but more are coming. So that message has been heard, and it's continued, and it continues to be told. Rest easy on that.
I think we just need to have, when we see the actual infrastructure of housing going up, and they had they were in the media the other day talking about building the 1.5 million homes, but there was nothing really that came up about community infrastructure, with the fast pace of the homes that are coming in.
I grant that there's a lot of housing required, but they know there's a lot of schools required.
And community centers and other infrastructure that's required as well.
Councillor Scott Shee.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. So I have a question about Glenorchy, the park, that area. So Councillor Nanda and I, we had a conversation with the CEO of the Conservation Horton. So he told us that, so this Glenorchy area is almost ready to be one of the conservation area park in Horton. That's that's the first, that will be the first conservation park in our Oakville. So my question is, how can make this happen, and how long will be this process to make this part of land to grant it from the provincial government and to the Horton Conservation Authority?
The Conservation Authority is a local board that the municipalities in the watershed all contribute members to. 4 of Oakville Council are on that board. I'm one, Councillor Elgar is another, Councillor Giddings is another, and Councillor Duddick is another. I'm not aware of a way to put that particular project in front of the province or the feds. Were you concerned that Conservation Halton wouldn't do the project that they've announced?
No, Mike, that's not my concern. I think they are willing to do this, but how can make this happen to approve by the provincial government?
Well,
if this land can be taken by the Horton Conservation Authority.
I think what I'd offer you is to take this matter offline and work out your answers that way.
Thank you.
Okay. Council, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve these, and I would like to ask you if you would like to add to the motion that the lighthouse replacement in Bronny Harbor be added, and that we also add a request for provincial action on the automotive and motorcycle noise matter. And since I'm not hearing a lot of objection to that, I'll push my luck further, and I'll take a motion from you, Councillor Longo, but let me push my luck further. Residents of Oakville have told me that it's past time for the 403 to be widened as it goes up outside of the, over there, zooming up to Mississauga. Would you like to include that as well? All right, Councillor Longo's moved the recommendation with those 3 additions. Anybody else want to add one? Then I'll call a vote. Any objection? Madam Clerk, there's no objection, and that carries. Thank you, everybody. That brings us to 10.4, the update report, the Halton Region Joint Best Planning Estimates. We have a presentation by Neil Garby, the Commissioner of Community Development, and he will introduce the Chief Planner from the region of Halton, Kurt Benson. And we have a registered delegation from Pamela Knight of Coronation Park Residents Association. Mr. Garby, you are up, and we are yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, members of council. You should find a copy of this presentation in your email. It will also be posted to our website as soon as we are able to. Tonight, we're presenting the draft joint best planning estimates. In the process, we want to provide some background and context to the numbers. Terminology is important in this confusing world of forecasting, so we will spend some time going through 3 terms that are commonly used, what they mean, and how they are used. Secondly, we have Kurt Benson, Halton Region's Chief Planner, to talk about the process of developing the Joint Best Planning Estimates. And lastly, Kirk Bigger will present an overview of the Oakville Joint Best Planning Estimates. We are happy to take questions at the end of our presentation. We wanted to provide you this report well in advance of the midtown meeting on the 24th, so people have lots of time to familiarize themselves and understand Midtown in the context of the entire town. To kick things off, there are three terms that are commonly used to describe population estimates: forecasts, targets, and yields, or sometimes called build-out. These terms are very different. They have different methods of calculating and have distinct purposes and uses. Starting with a forecast. Firstly, a forecast is a prediction or predictive model of the direction of growth over a period of time. Time is the important dimension to a forecast and is, in fact, what makes a forecast a forecast. Forecasts are foundational to much of the municipal business, including both hard infrastructure and community infrastructure. The timing of community centers and schools is highly dependent on forecasting to determine the timing for these key pieces of infrastructure. The private sector uses forecasting for business decisions such as if and when to invest, and as a proxy for how the local economy may be functioning. There are many inputs to the science of forecasting, and this list is not exhaustive. It's worth noting that the broader the geographic area, the easier it is to be predictive. For instance, the population forecast for Canada may only need to rely on natural births and deaths, immigration and emigration to get a fairly accurate picture of the direction of population growth. Forecasting Ontario's population growth has many more factors to consider, including the relative health of the provincial and other provincial economies and assumptions about in-migration and out-migration. Time is the critical factor in forecasting. When the population will arrive, drives many decisions. In the world of development charges, time places the limit to which growth infrastructure costs can be recovered. Infrastructure that carries capacity beyond the established horizon year becomes post-period benefit and cannot be collected until the infrastructure is within the horizon period. In operating budgets, things that are more population dependent can be planned based on the forecasts. Forecasts are not exclusively in official plans and can exist outside an official plan. When the forecasts are contained in an official plan, the forecast is not a cap, it's not a minimum, or it's not a maximum. It is a statement, not a policy. It is an important distinction. It establishes the forecasting for master plans and other works that occurs outside of the policy realm of an official plan. There's no penalty or real consequence for being wrong, but it is the best way to be predictive for the important purposes forecasts are used. Targets are different. Targets are stated goals or endpoints. They are not necessarily based on any factor or information and can be arbitrary or based on a narrow set of drivers. They can be minimums or maximums or be silent on either minimum or maximum. The example that is very topical is the provincial housing targets established for a number of the local municipalities. The drivers in that target are very simply housing affordability and overall housing supply. It does oppose a time frame being 2031. Targets can be considered in many ways. Performance measures. The provincial housing target was created, in my view, as a goal to achieve housing affordability and address the perceived housing crisis. The target becomes the expectation and measure by which progress or success is measured. Looking specifically at the provincial housing target, you can see the difference here between a forecast and a target. The difference is that a forecast is calculated based on real measurable inputs. This target is not based on any of those factors and is not assessed on the achievability of any of the partners in delivering the housing. The critical aspect of the provincial housing target is that all partners need to plan as if the target is a forecast, which, as you'll hear from Kurt and Kirk, has major implications on region-wide population estimates, and specifically for Oakville. Lastly, a yield is a simple calculation of maximum based on a specific policy framework. Time is not a factor, nor is there typically any other input aside from the framework. Yields are not typically used as a core planning tool because of the absence of the time factor. In small sites, it can be helpful to ensure there's consistency with a parent official plan when establishing zoning regulations. The other thing about yields is that yields are not static and definitive. Things change. Plazas turn into housing, old schools are converted to housing, brownfield sites are rehabilitated. There are many examples of intensification and adaptive reuse in Oakville and across virtually all municipalities. That, Mr. Mayor, is a brief 101 of the art and science of predicting population and employment into the future. I'll turn things over to Kurt, who's joining us virtually, who will run through how the joint best planning estimates were developed and their applicability.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of council. It's my pleasure to be here. I was invited by town staff to provide some additional information on the best planning estimates. These are a really critical tool that we use in planning Halton. We use them to define where and how we will grow, both population and jobs, and typically done in 5-year increments, looking at a time horizon of about 20 to 30 years. They are an important tool as they allow municipalities and other public agencies to plan for and coordinate things like new infrastructure, community services, facilities that new growth will depend upon. There's some information on this slide that kind of gives you a sense of where the best planning estimates are really important inputs to some of the work that we do and some of the decision making that we have to enable in order to plan our communities with the vision of growth that we have in mind. So things like modeling for transportation, modeling for infrastructure, understanding where and how growth will be located over time, so that we know that we can ensure those services, those facilities, and that infrastructure can respond to that growth, and it also contributes to our ability in quantifying, what demands is that or that growth going to place on those services, and what the cost is going to be. So things like development charge calculations are really important, and the best planning estimates gives us that forecast of growth using the best information that we have. Next slide, please. So the best planning estimates are usually completed after a comprehensive growth planning exercise done at the region. And some councillors will recall that in 2022, the region completed its growth portion of our municipal comprehensive review of our official plan. And this was done largely in response to the provincial direction for municipalities to accommodate growth consistent with the provincial growth plan. So Halton Region was required to plan for 1.1 million people and 500,000 jobs to the year 2051. Regional Council, in its vision for growth to 2051, adopted ROPA 49, in June of last year. And the amendment was, I'll back up maybe, ROPA, meaning the Regional Official Plan Amendment number 49. And that amendment was approved by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing in November of last year. So map 1H that you see on the left-hand side of the screen defines the regional urban structure. You know, these are you know, areas identified on the map where council has approved growth to be allocated. So you'll see in a lot of cases, there are high concentrations of growth being allocated to things like urban growth centers, major transit station areas, and other key nodes and transportation corridors across the region. And the town's urban structure on the right implements that vision as well. So the BPEs, or the best planning estimates, they provide a greater level of detail than, you know, some of the forecasts that are that can be found in the regional official plan. But ultimately, they reflect the approved plans for growth consistent with the urban structure contained in the regional official plan, and also emulated it in the town's official plan, the Livable Oakville plan. Next slide, please. So the best planning estimates are typically done in the months following the approval of Regional Council's growth plan, so ROPA 49. Given the provincial goal to deliver 1.5 million homes by 2031, it meant that the best planning estimates needed to be responsive to local municipal housing pledges. So you kind of see in the middle there where the province, in its you know, setting its goal for 1.5 million homes, provided a target to Oakville and to 2 other communities in Halton region. And our best planning estimates needed to be responsive to those aspirational targets. Each of those 3 municipalities signed on to those pledges. So it's important that that the BPEs are reflective of the new pledge, but also what we know to be in the what we're calling the active development pipeline. We know that there are you know, a series of planning applications that are already filed, that are already being reviewed. Those prospective units also needed to be factored in, and we work very closely with town staff and staff from our partner local municipalities to develop the joint best planning estimates to consider the housing pledges, as well as what is in the active development pipeline. Next slide, please. So just to recap, the best planning estimates are an important tool for long-term planning. They articulate in a greater level of detail the quantity of growth in population and jobs over the planning horizon to 2051. They assist and support good decision-making. They're used by municipalities as well as other public agencies, you know, to do their own planning. The school boards use some of the forecast information associated with the best planning estimates, for example. And it helps us in decision-making for, you know, plans to invest in infrastructure to support growth. And the data is also used in calculations for things like development charges to ensure that we are recovering costs associated with growth to the greatest degree possible. Next slide, please. So with Bill 23, the region's role in land use planning will be changing. Where upon proclamation of Bill 23, the region will no longer have an official plan. And our role will change from leading major growth planning exercises to supporting our local municipalities in completing growth planning exercises. The region will still be, pending any further change by the province, we will still be needing to provide important infrastructure like water and wastewater infrastructure. It's very important that that the planning and the delivery of that infrastructure is aligned with the vision for growth of each of our local municipal partners. So while there is a considerable amount of kind of a top-down direction from the province, there is also a considerable amount of bottom-up, leveraging town staff knowledge of the development landscape, what's in the pipeline, and the community intelligence that comes with local plans and priorities at the local level. So that way, that's really why it was important that we didn't, the region didn't proceed in developing the best planning estimates in isolation, that we really needed to make these joint best planning estimates. They're not ours, at the region, we don't own them. They need to be ours collectively. So yeah, we were quite fortunate and pleased to work with our municipal partners in developing the best planning estimates that Kirk is going to go through a little more here. So next slide, please. And I believe, yeah, Kirk, this is your slide.
Thanks, Kurt, and thanks to Neil for leading us out. Good evening, Council, Mayor Burton. It's great to be with everyone this evening, and we're excited to present this part of the evening's item on the best planning estimates as it relates specifically and a bit more detail to the town of Oakville. This is a chart that's in the report, and I've highlighted a few aspects on the table. I was just trying to see if I can get a mouse coming up here, but I don't see a cursor. Anyways, in the first column under 2051, the left side of the chart is really referring to population forecasts over those 4 phases, those periods 21, 2031, 2041, 2051. Thank you, Ken, for that. Awesome support in this room always. Thank you. So here, this column is really to illustrate the evolution of the forecasting environment that the region and the town and the other local municipalities have been dealing with over the years. So going back to the original growth plan, 2006, we looked at a certain level of population employment growth for Oakville, and that was in our first livable Oakville plan, dated around 2009. So then we fast forward through a couple versions of the growth plan and into the region's recent official plan review, and the preferred growth concept that emerged for Oakville and Halton was based on the 2019 growth plan, provincial growth plan, and that really looked at a 1.1 million residents for Halton and 500,000 jobs for Halton as well. And that's the first time we saw the forecast extending out to the year 2051. And correspondingly, that growth plan assigned, the region's official plan review based on the forecast in the growth plan, Oakville was forecast to accommodate 375,000 residents by 2051 and 180,000 residents or jobs, by 2051. And then we went through a couple other iterations of forecasting. ROPA 49, as Kurt alluded to earlier, approved by the minister, had a change to the population and employment forecast and actually didn't have a 2051 forecast there. But then it brought forward, that was ROPA 49, where we were trying to defer consideration of forecasting and accommodating growth past 2041 in order to see what capacity our current urban structure could hold, So that was the ROPA 49. The minister's decision adjusted those forecasts slightly, and then here we are today to talk in more detail about how we've been working with this evolving forecast landscape to look at the joint best planning estimates as of this year as calculated and worked through with our partners at the region. And those numbers are top of mind, I know, or for the community and of great interest. Just before I go to the next slide, really just to highlight again, on the population side, a 2051 forecast for Oakville to accommodate 444,000 new residents, or residents in total, And the Halton region also has increased over previous forecasts to 1.33 million. Then we have over on the employment side again, more jobs for Oakville, 212,788, and likewise an increase for employment at the regional level. So it's increasing across the board, including for Oakville. To get into the process recently, which has caused the increase over previous forecast, that I'll just say the number population of 444,000 and employment of 212,000, almost 213. There's two new components that have been incorporated to this forecast that make it different from past forecasts that we've worked on collectively here in the region and the town. The one that has been mentioned a couple of times this evening, the municipal housing targets. So in response to the provincial goal of building 1.5 million homes by 2031, Oakville's target within that goal is 33,000 units. It's a lot of numbers. Good thing it's written down. 33,000 units, pardon me. So that's caused an uptick in our more current forecasting. And then through the joint best planning exercise, best planning estimates exercise, we've taken a renewed look, a fresh look at emerging trends and market in Oakville and in consideration of local plans and priorities. And we're referring to that as the active development pipeline. So these two factors have combined to really accelerate the timing of growth that potentially could be coming to Oakville. So previously we had a number, say, of 375,000 for Oakville by 2051. That's now 444,000. That number would have possibly been achieved beyond 2051 because of the impacts of these targets and the development pipeline that is being accelerated. So that's what we're forecasting presently. I think we've been over the housing targets sufficiently, but just to help illustrate what we're looking at in terms of the development pipeline, and this is an interesting slide or a heat map, and you'll begin to see in the brighter colors where we have larger concentrations of development application, more units being proposed, more development being proposed in these locations. And we can see, I'll bring it up later, we've seen it earlier, the urban structure, but this is essentially the corridor here of Trafalgar Road, and this is the Midtown area. We can see some growth in our Main Street areas of Bronte and Kerr Village, for example. We can see that Palermo, another strategic growth area for the town, has some growth coming to it, and also in other locations along Dundas, another transit corridor. And then we see concentrations in North Oakville, south of the 407, south of Burnhamthorpe, actually, north of Dundas, where we're seeing the development of the former Greenfield areas, the North Oakville secondary plans coming into existence there through development. So that's really, this heat map is really what we relied on to help input to the joint best planning estimates in order to be able to model how our development pipeline was impacting our development here in Oakville. These slides, the next two slides really are trying to provide an overview of where the population growth is being concentrated in Oakville, as well the next slide would be for employment growth. And we see on this slide here some bar charts. The bar chart that is outlined in the square is really a sum of the growth that's being directed to our strategic growth areas, also known as our urban structure. So nodes and corridors along major transit ways or areas to be supported by mass public transit is where by the year 2051, 72% of the growth coming to Oakville will be accommodated. So this is really an indication of, on the previous slide, our urban structure is working, and here it's going to continue to accommodate additional growth through future development. The colors in the charts, the blue represents this first phase or first period of 2021 to 2031. And then the gold color is the next period from 2031 to 2041. And then the final one is the 2041 to 2051 period. The other two bars represent growth occurring in non-strategic growth area locations, so outside of our urban structure to a certain extent. everything's within the urban structure. Some are places to direct growth and others have planned growth of a different order of magnitude. So the North Oakville secondary plan area, largely the east, is again looking to build out. You can see here there's really just remaining growth to be accommodated on those lands for the first two periods of this forecast, 2021, 31 to 41. And that's 19%. And then finally, the rest of Oakville, again within our urban structure, but more the established areas, areas of minor intensification outside of growth areas. That quantity looks fairly even over time, and that's looking at 9% in total for the forecast period to 2051. Similarly, in our employment forecast, again, same colors apply for the different phases. We're seeing here in our strategic growth areas over the period, the forecast horizon to 2051, accommodating 53% of our jobs, new jobs, within strategic growth areas. So that would be in mixed use, high density type environments. And then we see in our North Oakville lands, less employment being accommodated on those non-SGA. I'll just clarify a little bit. Non-SGA, non-strategic growth areas. There are strategic growth areas in North Oakville along Trafalgar Urban Core, along the Dundas Urban Core. So that would be providing employment within this bar chart here, within the SGAs. And then the rest of Oakville, and this number is larger because this catches all our currently designated employment areas. So places that we've traditionally viewed as locations for all types of employment, from heavy industry right through to office. And so that's why this number is a little bit higher in the non-strategic growth area locations, because we have significant lands designated for employment growth outside of those SGAs. One more here. So just to conclude, the joint best planning estimates are being modeled after a substantially changed provincial planning framework. And we've been having this conversation for a number of years, including last night with the OP review update, but ongoing and anticipated changes coming as well from the province. And so the region and the town have been responding to that through our official plan review programs, and most recently, the best planning estimates have benefited from the results of the regional official plan review, and to a certain extent, our bottom-up approach through our planning decisions here in Oakville. Just to highlight that a little further, the OP review, the regional OP review is informed extensively by inputs from staff and the region and the town, and engagement back and forth over a number of years. Many meetings and really great collaboration, as well supported by many local, regional, local municipal council decisions. That's pretty important to set up for a best planning estimates exercise. We have these official plans, and we have all those updates and all that reviewing that's fed into it. Really, at the core of it, the anchor of it, for discussing growth management and a discussion around directing growth and protecting natural heritage systems and those sorts of features in the community, and then managing change in the non-strategic growth area locations. The urban structure really at the regional level and also at Oakville's level, the prime examples of key inputs into a joint best planning estimates exercise. All kinds of other features in the urban structure that support growth management. Where does transit go? Like I mentioned before, parks and open space, natural heritage systems, those sorts of features as well. Just to put it plainly, the joint best planning estimates is an output of all this planning and all these council decisions. And they really do provide for the long-term forecasting for appropriate and timely planning for infrastructure to support healthy and complete communities. And just to, because we're dealing with layers of government here, and it was a point of discussion earlier this evening, when we talk about infrastructure, it's really in its broadest sense. There's different ways of classifying it or categorizing it: hard infrastructure, soft infrastructure, servicing infrastructure, community infrastructure, public service facilities. So we at the town have some jurisdiction and some authority over some of those types of infrastructure pieces, but just to highlight some of the main ones that really do support community development and healthy, complete communities, it's the water, wastewater servicing provided by the region, for example, major transportation planning, regional transportation planning, So those are some of the key ones we look at regionally. And then locally, it's back to where are the residents going to need community centers? Where are we going to run buses? Where are we going to build a new town hall in relation to population development and growth, that sort of thing? And then just as a side to the school conversation, this updated joint best planning estimates exercise can be used to have conversations with other agencies about what we need, where and when, which is really valuable information to be sharing with our agency partners in the province. That is the conclusion of my slides. Thank you very much for listening. And we'd be happy to answer any questions and have a discussion about these topics with you.
Thank you very much. So just to clarify, or just to make sure I understand, the best planning estimates drive the amount that we can collect in development charges. Is that correct? Is that a takeaway from this? Don't all answer at once.
Yes, the best planning estimates are used in our development charge background study.
So they're a foundation document that feeds the development charges study.
Yes, to you, Mayor Burton, correct.
And did I also understand correctly that they may drive the number of schools the province prepares to build for an area?
Through you, Mayor Burton, that's correct. I think you're raising a really interesting point. If I might just try and elaborate, the development charges program, school information about where schools should go, parks and open space, recreation and libraries, all of those types of master planning exercises are underpinned with the best planning estimates.
So recalling the earlier slide that talked about how forecasts are not minimums or maximums or targets, what I think I'm seeing here is that these estimates are what we use. They drive how much infrastructure we have to plan to be able to provide through this time frame. Is that the essence of what it's for?
That's correct, Mayor Burton.
Okay, we have questions from Councillor Elgar and Councillor Nanda. Councillor Elgar.
I thank you for all the work you've done to date. I think there's quite a bit more left to do. I find it interesting when you try to drill it down so people can even understand it, of throwing numbers like this, but and thank you today for providing the number of hectares as we got the breakdown for our specific areas where we're trying to grow. Now, Midtown jumps off the map as people per hectare, gross hectare, never mind net hectare. And with this, we will be working on FSI going forward. That's where we're going to our new way of driving it, so that figure out what the coverage will be. So it's not about height anymore. It's about FSI going forward. Will staff be able to, at the next meeting, come back and give us an example for FSI for a few locations in Midtown of the planning applications we have, so that we as council, and if anybody's listening out there, will be able to visualize what it will impact, what the impact will be of an FSI of if it's 4 or 7 or 6 or 10. Can we do that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the discussion of FSI is really about short and fat or tall and skinny. And so through the process of the Midtown Committee of the Whole, our consultants will be deconstructing all of that information and providing from the very basic, what is FSI, do block planning with the committee and the community, so you get an understanding of the look and feel of what's possible. So you build it from a design perspective, make design choices, and that feeds into the policies that become the official plan.
So could you be able to also give us an example? Say we use 166 South Service Road, where we know it's what we have in, like, they're asking for like a 44-story, a 50-story, and a 58-story. Would you be able to come and tell us here's what their FSI would be? Like, I think that would help us all understand.
Sure. I think we actually have that.
It's very confusing.
apologize for interrupting, Councillor, but we do have that information for all of the development applications that we can provide council straight away.
We have that already?
It's in the
Yep,
planning
yeah, with-
justification reports for every application.
It's posted on, is it posted on the website? Not yet, but we'll
Not
provide
yet.
that
I
to
looked
council.
for it, I didn't see it.
We will provide that to
It's not there then today. Okay, because that could really help. Because even on a gross per hectare basis, it looks like we're looking like quite a number of people on a, right now, just roughing it, okay? Like how you can pack so many people in just that one application. Now, when we did this, when the region and the town worked on putting water and wastewater in the ground, what would they have used as a, if you convert it to an FSI? Instead of like, like when they did the overall, the town was part of it, I'm sure, of master planning. What was their FSI?
So through you, Mr. Burton, the purpose of FSI is not to determine the size of infrastructure. That's the population. So we do population forecasting to determine the size of the pipes and when it will arrive. So the FSI is an urban design tool. So it's apples and oranges there. So we don't rely on FSI. We don't convert it to an FSI because that's a design tool. We look at the population forecasts that determines the size of infrastructure that's required. We don't. The region does, and that's what the joint planning, best planning estimates are used for. So they use the raw numbers, the population numbers, to drive the sizing decisions and the timing decisions for infrastructure.
But the population number drives the number of units, which drives how much space you require per unit, whether you go low and wide or tall and thin.
So the how you house them in what form is immaterial to how many people are there. So the number of people is the definitive piece to determining the size of infrastructure. It's not the form of the house. It's
So the number,
people that's
but it's also, you got your key drivers. It's like how many people per unit. That's got to be one of the things. Is it 2 people per unit? Is it 2.4? Currently on the census, it's 2.9 across all of Oakville. Can we get an Excel spreadsheet showing us all that? Where, even though you're saying it's never been used, I think from what I've been told by planners, you can work it backwards to FSI. Is that impossible?
It's difficult to answer that question because they're not really related. You can put all the population in one area or you can spread it out. It doesn't really matter because the same amount of people are represented, whether it's in a small area or spread out over a larger area. So you can convert, so people can be converted to the number of units. Use that factor. It doesn't change the sizing of the infrastructure because the same amount of people are flushing the toilets and drinking the water.
Depending on, but the region, when they did the blocks, they did it by blocks, didn't they, for Mid-Oakville back in 2021 or 2022?
That's correct, yeah.
So by blocks, they just did a blanket?
They would do population assignments on smaller blocks.
Which drives, okay, I'm gonna have to work a little more with Excel on this because somehow I think there's a way to try to daisy chain it back to FSI. So I'll work with another planner on that because that's what I've understood, so.
Okay.
Can you come back with an Excel spreadsheet of what you're going to be presenting on August 24th to help us understand?
We'll provide whatever information as quickly as we can.
Perfect. Yeah. And it'll even help if you can put on the website what the FSI is for the applications that are active. I really appreciate that. Sure. Thank you.
So, Councillor, I have personally read the planning justification reports for every active Midtown application, including the ones that have been appealed, and they clearly give the FSIs that they are recommending for the design of their proposal. And as the commissioner has explained, the FSI doesn't work to the capacity or the number of people. It's to the design, whether it's tall and skinny or short and fat, as he put it. So you can have, you know, I said this last year a couple of times. The more park space you want, the less space on the ground for people there is, and the more you got to stack them up. And even then, you've got FSI as a tool to decide how much space will there be between the buildings. If you make them skinny, there's more space between the buildings, but if you make them skinny, they get taller.
It also depends on inputs, like how many people per unit. Whether you use 1.9 or 2.4 or 2.9.
No,
There's quite a few different, there's more than one, those two variables.
The gross number of people doesn't change.
The gross number of people doesn't change, but the net number of units do change.
Yes.
And the net number of units, they have a basic square meters.
Yes, if you, right.
Anyway,
So
we can sit down with Excel, you and I can show you some things.
And can we consider that this is really August 24th type conversation?
Well, it's to get ready for August 24th.
And tonight was really just to give you an advanced look at where the population numbers come from and how they get generated. And more importantly, what the difference is among forecasts, targets, and yields.
Well,
they're not the same.
I'm very familiar with targets. They are minimums. I know forecasts are the Ouija board and where we'd like to go. So
forecasts are minimums in the planning and the growth plan.
Targets are not?
The only target we have is 33,000 units. It's a hard target. We will achieve it or not at 33,000.
A target, am I wrong? Is a target
Sorry,
not
Your
a
Worship,
minimum?
point of order here. I'm not really sure if this is constructing a dialogue going forward. I'm sure the two of you can have a conversation after, but I don't really see us furthering the work of council at this point.
Okay, that's fine.
We could take it offline.
Yeah, okay, sure, thanks.
Councillor Nando.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just again, a better understanding of forecasting the population. I was thinking about some factors and was just wondering how you said you're looking at the emerging market trends and just persons per unit. With what's happening in the environment right now, with housing, with lack of affordability, more people having to live in the same homes or same units. So I'm wondering, have we considered any factors that even if we have smaller units such as condos, that there may be more people living there than there used to be in the past? And also considering that now, under Bill 23, you're able to have up to 3 units in your own home, and considering if those trends start to take place in the next 5 to 10 years, that our actual population numbers may actually be much higher than we're anticipating now?
Councillor, before staff begin their answer, in the report that accompanied, in the report for tonight, a discussion is given, I forget the page number, that talks about how they did consider the amount of population that would be represented by those extra units, those, that 3 units per home. And they said it would be, and I don't remember the number, but they even gave an estimate of the small number that would come from that. Perhaps Mr. Bigger could amplify that.
Through you, Mayor Burton, thank you. Yes, so the forecasted population accounts for changing PPUs over time. It accounts for different types of growth and different types of intensification. So the accessory dwelling unit opportunity from the Planning Act about having more dwelling units on a single property, that's part of the best planning estimates calculations, as well PPUs. So more people living in the same type of dwelling. It would surprise you to learn we have PPU forecasts over time. They change over time. So we have what is represented in the census from Stats Canada, and then also forecast of how that changes by unit type over time. So more people in condos, more people in homes. So all of those are increasing, and all of those are, those are considered forecasts as well, and they're input to the calculations for the best planning estimates.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Burton. Thank you very much for the report. It does give us a framework. It gets us started down a path to greater understanding. I'd like you to just give me a little bit more insight on what you mean by emerging trends. So it's a newer approach from what I gather on how you did the joint forecast. You added in this emerging trends. What are those emerging trends that you reflected and perhaps adjusted our numbers?
So are you, Councillor, through you, Mayor Burton, are you referring to the application pipeline or other emerging trends?
Yeah, application pipeline.
So I can go back to the slide if you would like, but generally, if you recall the heat map that we've been showing that shows the intensification and the growth and development occurring along those corridors and in our strategic growth areas, that's a reflection of applications that have been submitted to the town that are currently under review. So those are real units that have been applied for. And that's our emerging market, and that's what we've fed into the planning exercise.
So it's the emerging market, but they are not approved applications at this point. So they're an aspirational application potentially from a developer. They are not necessarily what will get approved. So to your earlier, I think, mini education, it is an estimate of what could potentially happen.
Maybe just to elaborate, Mayor Burton, and you can ask your question again, Councillor Heatherfield, if I didn't cover exactly what you're looking for. The emerging trends in the development pipeline gives us a good indication of distribution across the municipality.
Right.
It also gives us an indication of the heat of the local market. So you've all seen areas that become very active in the market and become popular, and it's based on the relative investment of a local developer in marketing and so on, and locational attributes and so on. So that feeds it as well. So that's an emerging trend. So you look at the volume, does it line up with what you're anticipating? You overlay your heat map to see whether there's the active development. People don't apply without the intention of developing generally, so you can see whether your anticipation is under accelerated or over accelerated based on. But one of the key aspects of that heat map is to show the geographic distribution of those applications. So it also adds into where you invest in your infrastructure.
Okay, so thank you for that, though I would counter that we direct the growth and encourage people to those exact areas. So it's kind of like the tail's a bit wagging the dog here. I mean, we actually say to them, we want you to grow in this area, not this area. So your heat map is really just confirming our urban structure is being built out and consistent with what we had endorsed before. So the number, if you will, is just consistent with the planning that had previously been agreed to. I just wanted to get some clarity on that. In terms of the numbers, again, I'm sure everybody worked really hard. I'm understanding that the region participated and it was a joint effort. Was there a third party that assessed these? Because that was a question at the Midtown meeting, that we have a third party, looking at our population or our calculations, and it might perhaps being done on the FSI side, but I just wondered, for the purpose of this being a foundational population, did Hemson or any of the others that we've relied on in the past do a, double check that this is reasonable and it's within spitting distance of what we're supposed to potentially hit?
Through you, Mayor Burton, thank you for the question. The process of the regional official plan review and the town's official plan review has involved consultants to help prepare these types of forecasts. So in the case of the region's OP review, Hemson Consulting was involved over a number of years to develop significant portions of the integrated growth management strategy, as well as the land needs assessment. So those are third party, those are consultants, those are professionals that have been retained, economists and planners, to develop those types of forecasts. And then regional staff and town staff and other local staff have been involved with updating those with those more current forecasting elements around the housing target and the local pipeline.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that for me. And then to the earlier comment by Mayor Burton about August 24th meeting and the content of that, I think it would be really helpful for us to be provided with what is the coverage percentage and the FSI that would actually achieve, and I'm thinking specifically about Midtown, those Midtown joint best estimates. I understand you're telling me it's not a target, but it is a framework in which we are going to build infrastructure. And if we could get the coverage percentage and FSI by the blocks that are in Midtown, that would be very helpful for us in terms of understanding FSI and understanding coverage. And it will also help lead us to some decision-making down the road for the Midtown Committee. I'm just asking if that could be brought to us sooner rather than later, because it is the core of some of the questions that are out in the public realm.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I hear you loud and clear about understanding FSI, and I think that we need to, and what's being planned is a foundational piece on what is FSI and how do we use it. Relating FSI and the population forecasts, because there's a horizon year of 2051 that we're planning our infrastructure to, and that's related to, it doesn't exactly translate into FSI because over time it extends beyond 2051. So we could represent 2051 in terms of a geographic distribution of population. However, the planning and the ongoing, it'll continue on past 2051. So we'll take that back. We'll consider it in how we can tie these pieces together and bring something back for Committee of the Whole.
I'd appreciate that, because there are documents that are out there from the region that talk about the blocks and that you can extrapolate the FSI to, and you can actually look at the coverage percentages that were used to make earlier predictions of for infrastructure, and so having that for August 24th, in my mind, is a very helpful tool to get us to where we need to get to, and it clarifies. I just have one other comment, and then we have a delegate that would like to speak that we never got to. Can you
Councillor, I'm aware that the council is waiting to hear the delegate.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just wondering about, in terms of the PPU again, can you just tell us or explain to us, and perhaps it's on August 24th, what are the assumptions for PPU when we get to unit counts? Because again, we're trying to understand how this information will feed to a longer term decision.
Mr. Mayor, if I can feed that back. So the population, how it translates back into the number of units the PPU per units. I believe we have that information that we can provide.
That would be lovely to have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara, and then Councillor Giddings.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you for this. I think it's gone a long way in helping me get towards what I'm looking for in this discussion, in particular with Midtown. Table 3 on page 9. For a very long time, I've always looked at the town of Oakville and where growth is going to go with regards to our 6 growth areas, the Bronte MTSA, and then the nodes in between. And this table has sort of distorted that a little bit in my head. So I'm I think I'm able to pull out those 7 growth areas if we did, and then the rest are nodes, I'm assuming then, like, we've got Trafalgar Urban Core North, Trafalgar Urban Core South, Dundas Urban Core West, East. Are these, from what we've been going through, are those the nodes that we're talking about, those areas?
Through you, Mayor Burton, thank you for the question. So the town's urban structure has evolved through our official plan review. And if you look at the current consolidation, there are some areas identified for further study. We've been undertaking those studies, and council's been involved with approving official plan amendments for those areas. Bronte-Go major transit station area being one, for example. So the regional urban structure and the town's urban structure have been evolving through this idea of nodes and corridors. The high-level planning term is strategic growth area. So those are nodes where we're directing intensification, and the corridors also accommodate intensification transit supportive densities and are the locations for transportation to be situated, mass transit. So we have a hierarchy of those across the town. And to simplify or complicate things, depending, the best planning estimates are based on a slightly different pattern or of geography than our urban structure. So they're evolving together using those sort of that classification system. But they're identified in terms of policy areas for the best planning estimates. That's in the appendix.
Yeah, and I get there's an evolution to it, and I appreciate that. I guess for what I'm hoping, and again, it's put some meat on the bones here for me. What I would like to do is some way, somehow compare apples to apples. So in our job about where are all these people going to go in the areas that we've delineated, I'd like to be able to compare them in relative terms. Here's the developable area of these places. Here's where the amount of people that we've planned should go there. Because then we can all have an honest conversation about, okay, we know Midtown's going to be the highest amount, but is that too much? Is this too little? I can't do that unless I have a relative comparative scale. So I guess again, going back, are we moving away from those sort of 7 primary areas then into this sort of SGA format now? Is that what you're saying? We've sort of pulled away from those areas? Or am I misunderstanding it?
No, you're not misunderstanding. I wouldn't say we're pulling away, we're building on, we're layering on with new elements of the structure. Okay. Some of that's indicated in our urban structure and also in the regional urban structure.
Okay. And I think there was a request, and I'm not sure if we're able to at some point down the road, but just for these areas, because I know the Bronte MTSA, for example, it doesn't have as much developable area because of some E3 emitters in there, and you're not able to put residential in certain areas. So it would be really helpful for me to understand in these areas that we've delineated, what is the developable residential area, so then we can do a sort of comparative with what we're planning to have there and how much can go there, and then we can do a comparative. Is that possible?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that it's drifting back into targets and not forecasting. So what we have before us are the forecasts, our expectation of the growth that's going to appear. So the relative decisions about whether it's too much or too little, this is all like this. When I was saying that this is not policy, this is almost like a statement. This is the population that you can expect in these areas.
Okay, so if we wanted to try and expect more in an area or less in an area, then how would we not need to bring policies forward to do that, though? Isn't this the first step that gets us to developing policy of which we have that discussion?
So then you're talking about growth beyond the planning horizon.
I might have to take this offline too, because it's probably me who's just not understanding. Is like when I look at the Bronte MTSA and it's like 4,500 people, and that's the estimates. I don't know why only 4,500 people would go there. I don't know if that's policy can encourage more there or less there, but I don't know what this number's telling me if there's no prescriptive policy to come out of it then. So I'm if it's just this is an estimate and that's all there is to it, I'm not sure what the next step is if we can't do something about that if I don't like that estimate.
So these are, I mean, the largest part of the forecast is for infrastructure planning.
Right.
So here's your expectation of growth does the infrastructure, can it carry that amount of population or not? The decisions about intensification, about policy, they're done every 5 years as we review those growth plans. So we set in place a plan. We see and say, is this reflecting what we intended to be on the ground? Is there a way of removing barriers? You see what's changed in the local economy. Maybe one of the businesses has relocated or expanded, and it's changed the environment, and make decisions that way that can, again, when you look at the next 5-year period, move to influence the shape and form.
Okay, no, fair enough. Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor,
Could I just add to that, possibly? Could I just add to that? I think you've actually brought out the perfect description of what is a forecast and what is a yield. I think what you were talking about was yields. These are forecasts, and the forecast, and Brawny Go is a perfect example of this. By 2051, probably those large emitters, those employment uses will not have left, right? So there still will be a significant amount of employment. So you won't see that population emerging by 2051. So these numbers are time-based, and so they reflect what is possible within the time period. And so I think that's an important distinction between looking at all of these, they're time-based, and it's the potential for them to attract that population employment within the time period. Brawny Go is a great example where you're not going to get that by 2051 because of the employment uses.
Councillor, to help you further, there is a policy for the Brawny MTSA. It is decreed by the province of Ontario, and it is that in the 146 hectares of that MTSA, we are to achieve a minimum of 150 people and jobs. And in our work together over the last several years on the ROPA 49 and other work, we established that the ratio between residents and jobs would be higher for jobs than for residents. It's sort of like almost the mirror of the Midtown area where the residents are greater than the jobs. And that means that the minimum policy forecast for Brawny MTSA is 21,900 people and jobs. And what staff have been telling you is they won't be here by 2051, only some of them will, because the existing employment uses they believe are sticky and they aren't going to up and leave really fast. I hope that helps. Okay. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I appreciate the complexity and all the questions from my council colleagues. CAO, you may have just answered my question when you talked about Bronte may not achieving that by 2051. If we look at our discussion earlier about a new town hall, we're looking at hybrid models and working from home and how many people are going to be in the building. We have a target of 17,000 people for Midtown for employment. Is that the type of thing we don't convert it, we just hold on to it and wait for it to grow itself out at some point?
Those are the considerations that you would make for sure. The expectation of employment and preservation of employment opportunities is one of those key pieces of policy that the council will be looking at.
And that could well be self-leveling by the proponents because they aren't going to build unless there's an appetite for the square footage.
That's correct, and there may be arguments along the way that they haven't achieved the expectation of employment, therefore there's a lack of market, therefore it should be something different. So that's the complication, or that's the challenge that we'll face, and we always face, especially with employment areas, is trying to preserve precious employment because it doesn't usually go the other way from residential to employment.
Can you see a day when we look at people that are working out of their home office and be able to include that as employment?
Yes, I can.
Great, thank you.
All right, Council, I take it that you would allow me to admit our delegation, Ms. Pam Knight, no stranger to us. Madam Clerk, could you call the delegation? I hope she's still with us.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, we can, and very well.
Perfect. I'm just trying to find my, my camera here and oh, there we go. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you this evening. My comments will be very brief. And you'll probably hear some things that you've already heard, so you're going to hear them again. First slide, please. So as you'll recall, at the council meeting in May that was attended by hundreds of people, many of us noted that we didn't have growth management information, such as where population would be allocated, what those allocations were based on, and so on. The report shared with us late last week began to reveal some of that information. In doing so, it underscores to us that there are pieces of the puzzle that are still missing. So we've given you a bit of a list here, actually, and some of these you've already talked about this evening, things like the total area as opposed to the developable area within particular growth areas and so on. A forecast of PPU factoring in the changing practices of our local population. An example is one that I think it was Councillor Nanda said a couple of weeks ago, that intergenerational living is definitely on the uprise, very common occurrence in Ward 7, but it's also picking up steam with other aspects as well. A forecast of the impact of accessory units resulting from recent provincial changes. The effects of any of our student population and their housing needs. The pace of growth within each of our growth areas, our nodes and our corridors, and that may relate back to those hotspots you were looking at, but measuring those to see how we're doing. The changes, again, that are taking place in how and where people work and their effect on traditional employment zones. So we're essentially just saying that we think we can't effectively determine appropriate levels of density and development and maintain that livability that we want without complete information, because our future depends on it. Next slide, please. So in terms of growth numbers, I'm going to touch on some things here that you've already heard, but here we go. So essentially, the provincial government has instructed Halton Region to plan for a population of 1 million people and 470,000 jobs by 2041. And according to Halton's published information for Oakville, that was prior to us seeing this report, obviously, this represents a 2041 population in Oakville of 313,460 people. Oakville's report places that number at 378,469. For 2051, the region's figure is 349,990 and Oakville's is 444,000, which represents almost 100,000 people more than the regional forecast and what has been mandated. It also signifies a doubling of Oakville's current population. Likewise, jobs have been forecast by the region as 160,880 for 2041, with the Oakville estimate showing 183,555. In 2051, the region's figure reflects a job number of 181,120, and Oakville's forecast is 212,788. So why did these forecasts differ? Next slide, please. The staff report tells us that the best planning estimates also include an increased emphasis on the active development applications currently in the planning review pipeline as part of the consideration of local plans and priorities during the preparation process. So to us, that means that we're using development applications to plan for growth rather than using them to measure progress against what we've already planned. Next slide, please. The result of that can easily be higher density than planned, as development applications regularly seek relief from height, density, and coverage standards. Back in 2021, the Auditor General noted a similar occurrence when speaking about land use planning in the Greater Golden Horseshoe, noting that in many cases, planning systems fail to achieve their objectives due to the overwhelming pressures from contradicting land developments. Next slide, please. So we have something we'd like you to consider. There's many municipalities that have invested in a growth management strategy to help drive their official plan reviews. And it's not just larger municipalities with big budgets. We've given you an example on the right here. The city of Kawartha Lakes, with a population of 80,000, has undertaken a GMS. And while it is a single-tier city, its small size suggests that GMS project can indeed be within budget constraints. Coupled with the information from our regional IGMS, an analytical focus on Oakville would deliver vitally important new data. Additionally, it would help present staff to deal with the weight of recent legislative changes at the provincial level. So we throw it out there to you that we don't have an updated, up-to-the-minute formal growth management strategy. Perhaps you'd consider adopting one. That concludes my remarks, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Knight, for the time and care you took to provide your information to us tonight. Council, I would now look for a mover for the indicated motion to receive the information. Councillor Lischina, thank you. Any objection? Madam Clerk, there being none, that carries. Council, on the rest of the agenda, I invite any questions about the rest of the material you've been provided, and I seek at the same time a motion to rise and report to Council. Councillor Knoll from St. John's, thank you for that. Any objection? There being no objection, I rise and report that Council has, I'm going to have to get my agenda and go through this. I got my pages out of order. I'll never do that again. Please believe me. That Council has considered consent items 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, and 8.4. Discussion items 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, and 10.4. And I need a mover and seconder for my report. Councillor Giddings and Councillor Chisholm, thank you. Any objection? Madam Clerk, the report is carried. Is there any new business that anyone wants to bring forward? I already congratulated, oh good, lots of hands. By the way, Council Chair Gary Carr got back to me. He appreciated very much our salutation on his significant birthday. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. And as I mentioned before, I'm in Newfoundland at the Canadian Association of Police Governance Conference, and my first conference as a member of the board there. And a hot topic of conversation here is similar to a conversation that is being had in the living rooms and, in fact, community rooms in Oakville, and that is the high rate of auto theft in our country, and particularly in the GTHA. I'm asking today during this session of new business if we can bring forward at some point in the very near future a resolution that the Halton Police Board had passed detailing some steps that we requested of the federal government, the insurance industry, the automotive manufacturers, and others to take to hopefully start to look beyond simply law enforcement to address the issue of auto theft, but actually deal with it at source and within sectors that could have a significant impact. So that motion's been circulated and it was sent to the town's clerk's department. I want to draw attention to it and hope that that could be brought to a council meeting in the near future for potential endorsement and a conversation.
Councillor, I'm sure that we know how to do that here. It will be done.
Oh, I know you do. I'm just asking that it happens sooner than later. Thank you very much.
Well, we'll assist you in making it happen.
Thank you, sir.
Councillor Haslett-Thiel.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. I actually wanted to speak to 14.4, the internal memo.
You have the floor. Please do.
I just wanted to comment that, you know, we often don't say a lot of nice things about provincial planning at times, but the planning hub strikes me as a really terrific advancement of collaborating and consolidating data and really shining a light on you know, the progress that towns and municipalities are making in their contribution to building homes for people. I'm wondering if the actual report that's submitted to the the ministry is being published for council.
Commissioner?
We can, through you, Mr. Mayor, we can provide that to council, the one just submitted and going into the future as well.
Right, so thank you for that. And then I have a second ask, and I'm just wondering, it strikes me that the planning hub's thoughts are around consolidating and a tracking mechanism, and we have talked about it over the course of the time I've been on council, and I'm wondering if there is a semi-annual report that would give us things like number of units, population, development in the pipeline, in a consolidated spreadsheet that sort of, I think to Councillor O'Meara's comment, allows us to know how we're doing, where we're at, not against a forecast, not against a yield, but maybe just, you get my drift. If that is something that we could have, that would be a big help for us in how we grapple with the decisions we have to make.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that's a great suggestion. We'll take that back.
Thank you very much.
Could I embellish the suggestion that we make it available to the public on the website as well? Because I know lots of our residents associations are interested in this.
That's an even better suggestion.
Thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you.
All right, Councillor McNeice.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to acknowledge the closing of our local barber shop in Bronte Village, Heaney's Barbershop. So after 67 years of cutting hair, Heaney's Barbershop and Hairstyling closed its doors at 100 Bronte Road on Saturday, July 15th, taking down the famous Heaney's barber pole outside the shop with a crowd of friends and family and customers. That pole was reportedly first erected by Jack Heaney when he opened the original Heaney's Barbershop in Bronte back in 1956. And Jack's daughter, Jackie, carried on his legacy for a number of years. And those who enjoyed the services of Heaney's that they provided can still get that from all the employees, including Jackie, who have moved to Class A Barbershop in South Oakville Center, formerly Hopedale Mall on Rebecca. And another employee, Sandy, has relocated to Intermezzo Hair Studio that's still in Bronte on Lakeshore Road. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Councillor Duddick, and I'd like to, oh, your hand went down. Councillor Duddick, I'm going to call the request for reports as soon as we get through these questions. So I don't know if your hand was up for that or what.
Sorry, Your Worship. I just wanted to raise the point that Councillor Longo and I would welcome your feedback. We're meeting later this week with staff regarding the next Midtown committee meeting. And if either members of council or members of the public have something that they'd like to see coming sooner rather than later, we'd welcome their feedback and their suggestions.
Thank you, Councillor. Let's try to remember that it takes time to do things. So we have more than one meeting ahead of us. There are two requests for reports, Council. One is a request for report on, and I'm counting on, they were circulated, so I think you've all seen them. One is moved by Councillor Chisholm and seconded by Councillor Dudek, and that is a request for report to detail how the green infrastructure will be preferred in the rainwater studies. And the second is moved by Councillor Dudek and seconded by Ray Chisholm. Look how even-handed they've been there. And that is for the staff to report back to council on the feasibility of implementing a bylaw for pool safety when hosting guests at a home where there is an unsecured pool present. Or as a resident of Oakville is titling this request, a TO's law. And shall I call it, I sense you're going to approve them both. I'll go for, will council approve both requests? Any objection to either request? Madam Clerk, both requests are approved. Council, thank you very much. You've been terrific to work with, and that ends the work for tonight, and we are adjourned.